That's it. Nick is here. All right. We will call to order the Board of Selectmen regular meeting for Wednesday, September 11th, 2024. I'd like to start this meeting, considering the date that we are meeting, by just asking for a moment of silence, particularly in honor of those who lost their lives and those who were so terribly affected by what happened 23 years ago. Thank you very much, everyone. I'd also like to just do a little something different and for us to all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, if we could. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everybody. You know, as I think about it, this board has been meeting now for a little over 8 months. We're supposed to have a regular meeting once a month. I know we've far surpassed that number, and certainly we've done whatever we needed to do in order to get the work done. And what I really wanted to do is just take a moment to thank the board members for the respect you've shown in terms of our conversation and our dialogues to each other, and also to the respect you've shown because of those commitments, because of the time that's involved, and because of the extra work that all of you have been putting in. I'd just like to thank you for your commitment to the roles that we have here. I feel like we're going to be getting into some more challenging issues as we go forward, and I think we've developed the type of rapport that's so helpful and productive in getting things done, and I'm looking for us to just kind of keep those roles and keep this going the way we've been doing it. So thank you, everybody, for what you've been doing. Speaking of challenging issues, one of the things I did want to mention a little bit was just with the country club. As part of my remarks, we've completed the takedown of the small structures over at the country club at this point in time. There was one structure, the halfway house, that left a hole in the ground. We had to bring in material in order to fill that in to make it safe. That's been done. We did not do anything to any soil. We did not do any digging. We were very diligent in making and careful and thoughtful in regards to making sure that we weren't doing anything that could cause any kind of harm, if you will, to the property and or as far as toxicity or anything along those lines. We've also, at this point in time, remowed some of the walking paths that people use, and we've also had Public Works who've been great in doing the work that was done on the buildings, on the structures, was done by Public Works. We saved a significant amount of money because we rented the equipment we needed, and we did it with our own resources. They've also gone around to different entrances that were a bit overgrown and made it easier for people who do want to use the property for walking and as trails to enable them to do that as well. And we're going to continue, even though we're working with the consultant on a master plan, we're going to continue to see what we can do to make the property more accessible, more usable, and more of an asset to the town as we move forward. And the intent of us looking at this consultant, I'll say again from my perspective, is so that we develop a plan for the entire 155 acres, that we don't look at proactively looking at proposals that others are making to us, but rather we take the initiative, we identify what's best for the town, and we work toward a solution that encompasses the entire property. And we actually implement a plan that we can tangibly make happen. And in talking to the consultants, I think we have that opportunity. So I appreciate that, and with that, we will start to move on to our next item of the agenda, which I will invite Superintendent Vonda Tenza. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Our first of the year, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, here I am. I'm back. So I do just want to start by saying that I spent this morning, it's really not written down in my report, but I spent this morning with several superintendents in the West Hartford area, and we do this once a month. It's time well spent, and one of the problems of practice that many of the superintendents were sharing is actually a celebration for our district, and they were sharing that they were noticing that it was very difficult to work with a board of education and a town board, or a board of finance, or a board of selectmen, and that the politics was making it very difficult to come to agreement on things. And, you know, I drove back a little faster than I should have to attend another meeting, and I always am grateful that I go, but it's hard to go to those, thinking about how lucky we are in this district and the leadership that this town offers. Every one of you is collaborative and supportive, and I just want to say for that I am grateful. It is not me, it has been in existence. I am just the happy and appreciative recipient of a wonderful working relationship with longstanding and new town community members.
Thank you.
So thank you. It's not always easy, I recognize that. We squeaked in our opening. I know that many community members and families were nervous. There was probably nobody more nervous than Vito Wisparo, our facilities director, and myself. And so the Saturday prior to school opening, we were finishing paving and lining and walking the halls and checking everything and communicating with the fire marshal to make sure we were safe to open. And I'm happy to report that we did, and we actually had very few teary children or teachers or parents, so that was good. You know, we have 866 at this point, and that's approximately 5 or 6 sections of each grade level. And our classrooms are of good size, and we are almost fully staffed, which is wonderful. We're still looking for a few paraeducators. Most districts are looking for far more staff than that, so we are very fortunate in that respect. We're still missing a few paras and 1 part-time school psychologist. I do want to send like a quick shout out to our teachers and staff. It's very difficult for them to be ready for opening day when they couldn't be in the building this summer. They couldn't even be in the building really up until school started. So for them to get their classrooms ready was a challenge. And our custodial staff worked really hard even to keep the building open on Saturday prior to Labor Day on Monday, so that anybody who wanted to could come in their classroom. We have a lot of dedicated staff in our district who wanted to make sure that the classrooms were welcome and open and warm and inviting for our learners. That's a tribute to our teachers. We have a lot of little projects going on, so I figured I would just touch on them. So our roof and grounds project, it has been and continue to be executed in phases. Our roof, that 1/4 of our roof, has been replaced. It's wonderful. We're very happy. That was finished. Our grounds work started. We did the paving. We've done a lot of the sidewalk repair in front of the building going around towards the first grade wing. We put a pause on that. We were collaboratively supportive of Guerra Construction. They've been nothing but excellent to us. They are out of Oxford and were asked by the governor to pause and assist in trying to get Oxford kind of up and running, and we were just as happy to pause for a few weeks and get everybody settled. So they're coming back shortly, and they will continue to work around the building with sidewalks and drainage, you know, and some of those other little pieces. So we're very pleased to report that the work will continue, and we will be in constant communication with our fire marshal to make sure that whatever is happening in a safe manner. Our Beecher Infrastructure Upgrade Building Committee, that's led by Dr. Maria Madonic, and we are actually meeting tomorrow afternoon for kind of like our next meeting. We started on August 1st, and Antonazzi and Associates with our architectural firm. I don't want to steal too much of her thunder, but we started by gaining some important information on our building. They asked us to group some representative staffing groups so that they could meet with them shortly. I asked them to wait till after open houses were over, and they did. And so we will be meeting tomorrow and hearing their general plan of timeline. We asked them to have that ready as well, and we will continue that work tomorrow. And as that unfolds, I'll work carefully with Dr. Madonic to make sure that the community is informed of everything that is happening. It's never too early to just very quickly mention the budget. We've already started thinking and planning. We don't have anything outstanding that we're already worried about. We feel confident with most of our staffing as it is. We are watching carefully our number of multi-language learners. That is increasing, and we're just doing a lot of careful scrutiny this fall to make sure that we're able to meet their needs with our 1 full-time staff member that we have. We feel confident that we can. But, you know, just to let you know, we are looking at that. And, you know, we feel very fortunate that, you know, our mission of really growing future leaders who are going to impact our world is something that we can do with the funds that you've allocated us and the staff that we have. So we feel confident in our work this year. And if you're hungry tomorrow, from 5:30 to 7:30, we have an ice cream social at Beecher Road School with food trucks, and I can scoop you some ice cream along some other dignitaries and community members. So if anybody has any questions.
I did have a quick question for you. Can you tell us about kindergarten, the age change? How did it go?
So our kindergarten sizes, we are at about 15 or 16. They're a little bit smaller this year. Our pre-K is a little bit larger. So we can see, you know, we can see that uptick is going to come, which is, we weren't sure whether it would be this year or next year. And so we did do our rounds of assessments, and we actually ended up taking, I think, all 18-ish that asked to be assessed early.
Oh, terrific.
Yes, so we took them.
So the impact is here and has been absorbed to the change, and then in subsequent years, you're going to kind of go back to the enrollment that you usually had for kindergarten. Is that right? Should we think of it that way?
I do. I think that there is another little bubble that we may look at next year, and it really does depend on whether the state. I'm not aware of whether the state will continue with a waiver process to allow prior to September 1st or not. I'm not aware of their final decision on that, and that will kind of impact how it sifts out next year.
Okay. So it sounds like the waiver itself was relatively small, though. You didn't have a huge number of people waiving.
We did not in this district.
Great.
Other districts
Great.
did.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think the population studies are looking at a slight bump in overall population, a slight bump in the overall decline in 2025 for kindergarten enrollment for children born in 2020.
Right.
And that is, I
Yes.
think, what we're starting to peak at in
Yeah, yeah.
pre-K.
Interesting. Okay. We'll stay tuned for more.
We recently met with our newly engaged town planner, and one of the items we talked about was specifically the demographics as relates very specifically to Beecher Road School. Our POCD consultant is doing demographics, but theirs are a little broader, and they don't show the same things, obviously. So I know that they wanted to reach out to the school system, so I just wanted to make you aware that they may be reaching out to get
Wonderful.
some detail, just so we told them there's a lot you have
Wonderful.
that they should be able to use without having to use their time to go through it, so.
And ours was updated last November, so I would
Excellent.
certainly ask to have it updated again
So
for a minimal impact.
that'll probably be coming, this coming week, you'll probably hear from them.
Great.
Rita, is our town planner hired?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, they have been engaged, correct. So we've had we just met with them again yesterday. We just met with them yesterday to set up the scope of work, Andrea, which will be coming out shortly, and to identify what our priorities are, what we're working on, just give them some information so they've got some work to do. You know, so they've got, based on what we would like to see them do. So,
And this is Goman in York.
Goldman in York,
Okay. Just-
correct.
Yeah, got a bunch of different names.
That's true, so that you know.
Yeah.
So I'll keep you posted on that, Maria, so that from your perspective, and they may attend,
Sure.
we'll talk.
It's an excellent question they have because our population statistics do not mirror, regional or national trends. So it's an excellent question and there's answers to that. So I think it'd be great to sit down and talk to them. And
They're breaking it down by class in terms of when people are coming in and, what the age groups are, things of that nature, the birth things. So it's pretty interesting what they'd like to do, but again, we just said, you may have already done some of that, so
Yeah.
please make sure we work in conjunction with one another.
Extra eyes are always
Right.
better.
So, Vonda, with that in mind, though, you already sort of collaborate with the Amity Regional District. You feed your study up to them, or do they do a completely separate study?
They do a completely separate study. Ours is just the pre-K-6 population.
Right.
We work with Peter Prouda. There is another one.
Still.
NESDEC. Right.
Wonderful.
Still, right. So we compare the two of them.
So he has a lot of familiarity with Woodbridge.
Yes.
And I think Amity uses NESDEC, so that's a completely
Yes.
separate study,
But
right?
I use them both.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like more data.
We're going to have plenty of data.
I like data.
I
Thank
like
you.
data.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is our Assistant Administrative Officer's report. Karen?
Since last meeting, we reviewed the property and room rental policies. We gave Amika and Tony a chance to review them. We got their comments back. We met a few more times, adjusted them, sent them over to Nick. We're still, looking at fees and security deposits, and Nick is gonna get the policies back to us. We'll get them to you next month for approval.
And basically, just for the purpose, you can just, what we're talking about in terms of the policies we're talking about, if you want to just review that briefly.
The property involved is the gazebo and the green and the grove. And rooms are the Friends room at the library and some of the rooms at the center building, the cafeteria and the gym as well. And being that the gym and the cafeteria are newly renovated, we're
think they'll
taking
start
a
getting additional
really good
use.
look at.
Yeah. There might be a bigger demand,
Right.
so. Any questions? Okay, we will move
Mika,
to,
I'm just gonna ask that you maybe speak more into the microphone, because I'm struggling.
Me specifically?
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, our next item is our Administrative Officers and Director of Finance report. Tony,
Thank you. So I have first is a year-end report for 2024. This is for fiscal year 2024. We currently have our auditors. We're working now through the audit process. And so these are unaudited expenditures and revenues, but are, should be pretty much on. I don't anticipate any audit adjustments this year. The result is a year-end surplus of $858,776, and so this gives us a fund balance of $8.9 million, or just over 16% of our expenditures for that year. Some of our highlights for the year: property taxes are slightly above the budget, although if you consider a budget of almost $52 million, to have a surplus of 92,000 is pretty close. Interest income is generated a surplus of $455,000, as we've discussed throughout the year. And it's similar to intergovernmental revenue, surplus $231,000. That was from a grant that we received that we did not anticipate from the state of Connecticut. Most of the items, those are the two main items for our revenues, are the interest income and the state grant we received. That's a majority of the surplus we had in revenues. For expenditures, the police had a surplus mainly due to vacant positions. They currently have 3 vacant positions, and also some work-related injuries, which also contributed to their surplus. The fire department had a surplus of $32,000, mostly due to some savings in some radio expenditures and some supplies. The building official, I tried to give you just the highlights of the major items. The building official has a surplus of about $24,000. That's mainly part-time wages. Public Works is $20,000 again in wages. Human Services is $26,000, and that's also in part-time wages and youth services operations. So when we have surpluses in these budgets, we take these into consideration when we do the following year's budget, so that we try to account for some of these items. In recreation, there's a surplus of just under $20,000 due to the closure of the pool, mostly, and that also impacted pool and gym, which was a surplus of about $30,000. Finally, in benefits, we've had a $70,000 surplus due to restructuring of the MERS plan, and which is a retirement plan for the town employees. And finally, Amity's surplus, which was reduced from their March payment, was $462,806. So if you combine all these, we have a cash surplus of $858,000 for current year operations. There's a summary page, which is the third page in your document, which outlines the revenues and expenditures by department and gives you a nice summary of the operations for the year. And, so that's highlights for the year.
Tony, can I ask you a quick question about the summary page
Sure.
document?
Yeah.
So the Amity Regional School District has an expenditure line, and then separately, we're recognizing that we reduce the payment during
Right.
the year.
Right.
Is that getting to be the equivalent of their line item is just lower?
So,
Or should
so
we
their
not do it
budget,
that way?
so yeah, so basically what happens is their actual is lower than their budget, essentially.
Right,
So we
Right.
budgeted 17.9, almost 18, 17,967, 346. That was the budget in the budget process. That was what they had presented at the time.
right.
If you remember during the budget. But because of the surplus, we only actually paid them 17,504,540. So it's really, has nothing to do with the revenue, rather, our expenditures were less than we'd anticipated.
Is that consistent with what's happened in the previous years where it has to do with the fact that they self-insure and that, a number of the other things, or?
There's a number of reasons. I'm not 100% familiar with them.
Okay,
But I know that this has happened in the past few years.
Right.
And it's actually a cleaner, better way to track it, and it's an easier way to understand it than when we used to get money back, which was a lot more confusing, I think.
So Tony,
So-
this is the first year we're recognizing it in the same line
Yeah,
item,
this is the first
basically.
year, yeah.
Okay, because Mika, I think you're referring to like what changed recently, and it was the way in which they were sending the money back.
Right.
They used to send it back in a different manner, which would cause us to need to push it into another budget year. Now you see it here, all on one line. So
Right, it's easier to identify, it's
Yeah.
easier to track. Before it was in revenue, then we had to transfer it from revenue, and it was,
Right.
it was
And
very complicated.
It was hard to know what they really needed to run the school district that year when you accounted for the surplus they had the previous year that they had to give back that year.
Right, which is what this is.
Right, which is not how Beecher Road School's budget works, because at the end of that year, that money is
Right.
taken care of in the same
So
facility.
on this schedule, the 11,318, if you're looking at the schedule,
Yeah.
that's the actual remaining funds from the current year, from '24.
Right,
But the 462,806 in Amity is from the previous year.
right.
Because they have to go through their audit, they have to wait till their audit's finished. Once they have their audit finished, then they'll reduce the payment in March. Because they usually finish their audit in like January.
Right, so we can get used to this, but then their action on returning surplus, they're getting tighter with their surplus, they're keeping more of it, so it is gonna start disappearing, right? So,
That's my understanding.
the expectation.
Right,
okay, thank you.
okay.
Tony, just a question on the intergovernmental revenues.
Sure.
That's, our share of that, is that related to business income for our town relative to other towns? I mean,
There's a formula.
why is ours that as opposed to another town?
So is a formula based on a number of factors, but when the state has a surplus, they have these fiscal guide rails, and it triggers certain grant programs and certain programs where we get some money back if the state does well. If the state doesn't do well, then we don't get as much back, but there's not a direct relationship between our businesses. It's more of a state formula, which I would imagine is pretty complicated and based on need.
I'm sure it is.
So I'm not 100% sure how they come up with the formula, but I know it's a program that's based on how well the state does. Then, if they have surplus monies, they give some back to the towns.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
What about 16%? What is our, that seems to be a
little higher.
above what our
It's
target is.
it's a little higher than our target, certainly. So I would say for AAA rated communities, it's probably a little higher, slightly above average, but for our target, it's a little higher than our target. So you can consider that when you go through the budget process.
When you did that analysis for us before, when you compared us to other communities, it seemed as if we were in the middle where it came to fund balance.
Correct.
Like we were, as far as the AAA rated
Right.
communities were concerned, we were actually in the middle.
Right.
So you're saying now we're moving toward, or is
Well,
we
yeah,
still?
we're probably a little middle to slightly higher than the middle.
Right, okay. The high side, okay.
Not high. There's
Right.
certainly a lot of communities much higher than us, but I'd say, a little higher than the middle.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tony, does that ever get compared to, like, in relation to population? Like, they don't just compare one town to another. Like, if a town has 4 times the population of a town, like,
For
do
fund
they?
balance?
For fund balance, like, do they compare it
It's a
within
percentage of
similar-
your budget. So
Okay.
generally, the larger your budget, the larger your actual balance, but as a percentage of your budget,
Okay, gotcha.
that's the way to compare for that. And also, there's a number of factors that go into not just your fund balance, but your diversity of your grand list, and there's a number of factors which we monitor for fiscal health. If you have a grand list that's relying on one type of income, you're more susceptible to a downturn of some sort than if it's diversified.
Mika, Andrea has her hand up.
Yes. Andrea?
Yes, thank you. In the context of this conversation, I'm just wondering if there would be a benefit to consider using some of these surplus funds in lieu of, as our match to some grants that we may be pursuing.
You could certainly
Like the community center.
You could certainly do that, and actually, if you were going to use some of your fund balance, which is certainly a good discussion to have, I would suggest you use it on one-time expenditures, whether they're capital in nature or items that you don't have to worry about funding the following year. So otherwise, you'll create like a problem in the following year budget if, say, you use it for salaries, right? And then the following year, you wouldn't have that money for those, arguably for salary. But if you use it for, like Andrea suggests, a capital project, whether it's the community center or some other project, that's certainly an option.
Tony, what is the timing for a decision like that?
So to use fund balance, it's a town meeting required. So whatever the requirements are in the charter for a town meeting, that's simply the process.
And
We've used it, I'm trying to think of the last time we used fund balance for a special project. I think it was to purchase phase 3 of the Racebrook track, which was about
a long time ago,
500,000 maybe.
right?
I think that was the last time we used it for a one-time purpose. Other than that, we tend to fluctuate the amount in the budget that we use to our contribution from fund balance. That's usually the way that it's used, but
So at the conclusion of a fiscal year, though, there's a certain time period, and when that time period is over, it's in the fund balance. Then we have
Correct.
to do the process to get it out
Correct,
of
get
fund
it out
balance.
of fund balance,
Okay.
correct.
And
And
this
also-
is already in.
also when you get next year's amount, when you get next year's report,
Projection amount.
of course, it's a percentage of the budget, so the denominator of the equation is going to increase, which will lower the percentage. So it
Yeah.
sort of resets each year
Right.
as the budget goes up.
But with regard to this is already in the
That's
fund balance.
correct.
Yeah,
It's in fund balance.
Yeah,
To
so-
get it out, you have to have there's a process set forth
right.
in the charter.
Great.
Is there a period of time, again, to Sheila's question, is there a period of time before it gets into fund balance where we can consider using those funds for something else?
You can use, if it's before the end
Without
of the year,
necessarily the whole process.
so there's different guidelines based on if it's a supplemental appropriation, if it's a surplus in expenditure line, if it's contingency. There's different rules for different classifications of funds. So depending on where the money comes from, there's different, right.
Right, so if we had an approved budget and we wanted to just do a line item transfer from wherever the fund balance was being generated to that other line item, we do that before June 30th.
Yeah, yeah. If you have a surplus in an expenditure line, you
Yeah.
can, you can transfer that without a problem.
Yeah.
But if you want to go from from a contingency, it has to be below a certain amount, and,
Understood.
yeah.
And anything that's not in the approved budget that happens at the annual
Right.
town meeting, that's a new appropriation that needs the whole process.
Right, right.
And
Understood.
you mentioned that a large portion of our surplus this year was from the unexpected return on our investments, which was
Correct.
related
Right.
to the interest rates going up with the Fed's reaction to inflation.
Right.
Given that the effects of inflation aren't going to go away, but probably, I would imagine, possibly sometime in the future, those rates are going to change. But we're still going to be seeing the effects of the inflationary time period on our annual budgets moving forward. So that may not be, that certainly isn't a good thing,
Right.
because that's just kind of a one-time bump in the investment portfolio. But we're going to see those expenses expanded for time, all the time moving forward. We're not going to see prices that have inflated come back down.
Becomes part of the base cost of the item.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe we need a larger fund balance to deal with what's going to hit us.
That's, yeah.
That's generally why you should be careful when you use fund balance for that reason, or for some unknown costs. If you have,
Additionally, I'm sorry.
I would say also we fit into the category where our income is not
Yes.
very diversified.
Correct.
So
That's
therefore,
correct.
we are at higher risk for.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, thank you.
that's correct.
All right, next item, funding requests.
There are none.
Select,
Yay.
Good, very good.
and the lot zip grant?
Lots of, yes. So in your package is the commitment to fund letter for our LOTSIP grant, just by way of background. And the grant is for $7.8 million for improvements to the business district in terms of multimodal path, sidewalks, light poles, and other streetscape improvements. And this is, I think, this is by far the largest grant opportunity that we've had since I've been here, at least on the town side. And just as by way of background, this began in 2017 when the DOT had a connectivity program that they were trying to promote. And so we participated in it, and it led to a grant that we used to do the connectivity study, which many of you have seen. And that we use that connectivity study to apply for a LOTSIP grant, which stands for Local Transportation Capital Improvement Program. And the way the LOTSIP program works is the grant pays for all of the construction costs, including rights of way, utilities, costs, contingencies, and even there's an allotment for administration once you start the project. But it does not account for or cover the design cost. So we have made plans to use our ARP money to cover the design cost. So essentially you're using that grant money which allows you then to take advantage of $7.8 million in additional grant funds. So it's a pretty good return, I think, on that grant money. So the town signs this letter. We begin the process of, we have to go through a procurement process for engineering services. Our goal is to have the engineering proposal and just a presentation of the project at one of your later meetings. Once we sign on the engineer, it's approximately 1 year timeline for design, and then the project will begin.
So, Tony, I had a question. I do remember the presentation that was given to us. It was SLR.
Correct.
Was the consultant, right? So
Right.
it's the previous board, so David and I probably remember
Right,
it more.
right. That's why we figured we'd give it an update.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I just want to understand what's in front of us now. Does it lock us into particular items in what was submitted? Because I know the traffic light on Amity Road
It does
was
not.
a big part.
It does not.
Okay.
It's just an estimate and a scope of work. I mean, there are certain things that are state requirements that we have to, but for instance, the traffic signal was removed from this.
From their funding.
Correct.
but they weren't gonna do the design and engineering of that
Right, but they
anyway.
also
That was gonna
removed
have to be
the
us.
construction of the traffic signal.
Right.
They didn't say no, but they didn't include it
They
as
didn't
part
fund
of
it.
this
They didn't
funding.
fund it. Okay,
Doesn't mean we can't apply for a future LOTSIP grant, which is what we were encouraged to do by our Council of Governments. But for this particular one, it was not included. That was really the only substantial change that they made to our application that you
Right.
saw.
right. So I'm just curious to know if anything here locks us into not using our ARPA funds for the portion of work that we would have to fund for the traffic signal.
So, yes.
Okay.
That we have to have our ARPA funds committed to, which means we have to have a contract in place by December 31st of this year. So timing alone would prevent you from using ARP funds for that purpose.
Even if it was just to do the initial step without funding in
I
place
suppose
to
there could be some initial
construct it. Yeah.
cost. Once we get back the proposal for this project, I suppose we could use it for some preliminary steps if
Right.
we choose.
So the municipal contribution here, that accounts for the entirety of the ARP funds that we had allocated for this project?
We'll see.
Okay,
There may be some money left over, in which case you'll have to react to that
Yeah.
before December 31st.
very quickly then.
Right, so
Yeah,
you'll have
yeah,
basically
Yeah.
2
I
months.
guess my concern here is that I think that traffic light is really important to everything else they envisioned.
Mhm.
So I don't know how we go about
We
it
have to reapply for the traffic light, which we intend to do, but
unless we just fund it ourselves, right?
Well,
I
what
mean,
you can do is you can
We
at
would need
least
the
lock in the
funding.
funding for the design piece, if to the extent there is any.
If it's our
because
We
it's
intent.
a
might have already
state
done a
road.
lot of it through the initial, but,
because it's a state road, the state has to approve the light.
right.
Right.
So we would have to reapply, request from them, and see if they just didn't want to fund it, or they just don't feel. In the past, it's always been that they don't feel we need a light at that spot. They
Right.
don't feel, we didn't have enough statistical data to support having a light at that location.
So the SLR consultant, when he presented, said that
They
we
finally
did
found a way,
have the right
correct.
case to be made. So
Correct.
now the question of, so I guess what I'm trying to understand is, can that light only be put in through a LoTSIP grant?
No.
No,
Okay, so there are other avenues, we would just have to figure out how to
You just
explore
need
them
approval from the state to put the light there.
separate from LoTSIP.
Right.
Okay, so any time of the year we could apply for approval, or is there a timeline on that as well?
No, I think if we had the funding in place anytime.
if we wanted,
Okay.
it is
I-
close to $1 million.
It was about almost $1 million.
Yeah, but
yeah.
it's probably worth that for, I mean, at
But
least
there are
from
lots
what
of funds
SLR
available.
presented as the vision for down there,
Mm-hmm.
that seemed key.
I don't think I think the bigger issue is getting approval for the light, not the LOTSIP piece.
Correct. Correct.
The LOTSIP
Because
piece is
if
not
we can get the approval,
challenge.
we can apply for LOTSIP to pay
Right,
for it. And the
right.
state, if it's approved, the
Right.
state would fund it.
All right,
Right.
so I guess I didn't understand, and maybe we'll hear from SLR when they come back in the next steps here, or are they not involved in the engineering?
No, well, we have to go through a procurement process because we're using
So
the
somebody
ARP
will be
funds.
the engineer,
Right.
okay. So, and I guess they did represent that, you know, it was important and that the study itself, everything that we funded, was gonna give us the information we needed to submit to the state in order to get that. So I would have guessed back then that the state was gonna say, that intersection is not important enough in our scope of view. It's not there's not a lot of fatalities there, but it's really key to the design and the placemaking and all of that. So if it's still the case that if our vision of placemaking in that district revolves around slowing that traffic down and having a light there to improve safety, but also to get people to slow down and realize they're in our business district, business/residential district, especially if we're increasing density, more people.
Could you clarify where is the light in question? Because it must be
Bradley.
different than Amity and Lucy. So this is the light at Bradley.
Bradley and.
Bradley and Amity.
Bradley and Amity, okay.
Right.
That was the one that was applied for and not included.
And Andrea
the
has
state.
her hand up as well.
Yes,
too.
Andrea? Continue to do that because I can't.
Thank you. I think the traffic light discussion is important, and I don't want to interrupt that, so I'm willing to wait if that point isn't resolved, because mine is not specific to the traffic light.
The intent, from a general standpoint, the intent is for us to reapply on a consistent basis for the traffic light, because I think everyone involved in the overall project, everyone familiar with it, feels that it would be an asset, and it's very important to that area, from, as Sheila said, from a safety and just a pedestrian standpoint in particular. So it's something that now it becomes a matter of, okay, if we exhaust our grant capabilities to get the light, should we look to fund it ourselves and just get the approval? In both cases, you need the state approval, which we haven't been able to get so far. The difference now is that SLR, with their studies, were finally able to show the statistical data that supported having a light, whereas in the past, we just didn't have that data. So now we have data that supports the fact that a light should be there. So now we,
And I don't want to get into the weeds here, but part of the issue was, you know, they had questions on, you know, the process they use, what data points did you use, did you put it here, did you put it there, you know, these kinds of detailed questions that were not resolved.
yeah, so far, the state hasn't wanted to put
As
a
they like to.
light there. So
Right.
now what we have to
Right.
do is we have to keep pushing.
Decades.
We have to keep
As I
pushing.
recall, that other attempts have failed on that
Correct.
particular place, so.
Correct. But in the past, they've given us data that says,
Right.
you don't have enough, it doesn't work.
Right,
This time, we gave them data, says, okay, you told us we needed this, here's what we have.
that's good.
So, but now it's a matter of, okay, let's keep pushing. Obviously, the way we would like to push it is to do that through a grant because of the cost of it. But at some point in time, the way to do it may be, as Sheila's suggesting, just let's go try to do it and pay for it ourselves.
Well, Sheila is certainly right, because we did go through that process with 2030 and with the consultants. And I attended all of those meetings, and I know that it was a very important piece to both the people who did show up at those meetings, as well as to the plan that they ultimately developed. And it may even be more important with the new development that's going on down Bradley.
And maybe there are developments happening that will make a better case for that light,
That improve the case.
improve the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the density
What's-
down there.
What's surprising in this one, in what we saw, was the cost of the light itself, which is upwards
As
of
David pointed out, that's going to
$800,000.
continue to go up. That's not
Correct.
going to go down.
The cost of telephone poles is crazy. Everything's, the
Yeah.
cost
I
of
mean,
everything.
Yeah.
I don't want to preempt
Andrea's question.
Andrea's question, but I have one.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, so I actually have a couple of questions. In addition, I guess, to the concern about the light, as I brought up in different contexts at multiple meetings, am increasingly concerned about our infrastructure's ability to mitigate floods. And the recent flooding in Oxford, I think, sheds light on the importance of addressing infrastructure prior to beautification. Because, and well, for obvious reasons, we know how our weather patterns are changing, and we experience flooding in this area already. So a really critical question I think that needs to be asked in this context is what work of this, if any, is addressing the infrastructure and the capacity of that infrastructure to manage rainstorms or in snow melt or whatever it may be. If none of it is, and I recognize some of the sewers and drainage systems I'd imagine would be state-owned, and so what ability do we have to even address those? Is it worth contacting the state to talk that through before signing this and moving forward? Because I would just hate for us to spend money, and money that could be applied to other things, these ARP funds, on beautification only to in the future have it all ripped up to fix the root of some issues. So that's like the key question I have. I do have other questions like how this is gonna connect with the Toll Brothers sidewalk, the Regency development sidewalk, what the plan is there, cause that happened, I think, after this process began. And a clarity on the art funds, cause I know we were planning or discussing using some of those for the community center. Is this the same pot or a different pot? So I know that's a lot of questions, but my primary concern and focus is on infrastructure and that priority over beautification, and how that fits into
Well,
this.
Keep, oh, David.
Yeah. I don't have a lot to add to that, other than it's not just beautification.
Yeah.
Because the traffic pattern is addressed, the safety issue of many of those intersections, and also, some reconfiguration that will affect lives in many more ways than just beautification in real safety. But I'm also interested in the flooding issue is one.
We did ask both our SLR, our consultant, and we've also, Tony's also gotten some information as relates to drainage is something we brought up. It's something we want to make sure is addressed as part of that it's not just moving, changing, putting esplanades, changing lines and putting in curbs and sidewalks type of thing, all of which is considered in this, and as you said, David, much more than beautification. I think a small portion of it does call for plants and things of that nature, but it's primarily the other. I think, Andrea, my response would be that we will have the engineer that we select to do the next part of the study in here. Now, when checking on the grant, we identified that if there is additional drainage type infrastructure work that's required because of sewers or because of things of that nature, that can be added once it's identified that it's required.
It could, you're correct.
So,
And that's what,
Even if it's on a state road.
well, the state is the one who would add it to their lot zip grant.
yes, you can add to a lot zip grant if it's identified, you can certainly ask him this directly, when he's here, but I know we've already done some preliminary work on some drainage, including some some pipe and video inspections and some other things to apply for it. So I know there's some drainage work in the project, but it's certainly.
Yeah, I see quantity of one there, which I wasn't quite sure what that meant, Tony. On that line item for drainage. Is that just? I don't know.
I know he mentioned, we mentioned to him about one specific property that has suffered from drainage issues. And, if you remember, he did say that they would, hope to, work on that and solve that problem to the best that they can.
Right. For example, what we were aware of in terms of there being a drainage problem was brought up by one of the landowners or property owners, business owners down there, that they have in the past asked about drainage that hasn't been addressed. We've asked about getting that addressed as part of this overall plan, and they said, yes, that can be. If it's identified as a problem, we can indeed add money if we need to make sure we mitigate that. And it would be added to the grant. It would be the state who puts more money in there so that it can be done. Because it would be just exactly what you said. You don't want to change curbs and sidewalks only to have them rip up, because you have to do a drainage type thing. So it would be something that's necessary in order for us to complete the project. As far as the sidewalks connecting to the Toll Brothers, no, there wasn't, because we didn't know if we were getting a grant. There was nothing that was done, although I did reach out to Toll Brothers to let them know about this grant and what it would entail. And there is a piece of sidewalk that goes past the, on Bradley, that they put in their own sidewalk, and this sidewalk would be larger than what they've already put in. But Toll Brothers is aware that this is happening, and I've asked them for an opportunity to tell them more about it through the consultant and people who know a little bit more about it when that time comes. But until such time as we received commitment for the grant, there was no reason to do much more. But they're aware of it, they know that we'll be reaching out, and we'll have to work through it.
Can I ask a,
Mika, if I heard you correctly, you said if it's identified as a problem regarding the drainage and flooding. And I heard you say that a business reported it as a problem. And we already know, and I've heard in this discussion, that it is a problem. So why are you, help me to understand, we know it's a problem. So.
Which is,
so
yeah, that's the reason we
I'm
brought it up.
confused.
I agree. Go on, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just that they would just have to provide calculations and support for that issue. That's the what would
But
have to
isn't
take
that
place.
what this is for?
Yeah, that's
Like,
right. That's right.
Isn't this an opportunity to fund, or maybe that's a better question for me to be asking. What can this LOTSIP grant fund? Can it fund infrastructure improvements in the context in which we're speaking now? And if so, is it worth, before signing, or I'm advocating, I guess, that we talk to the state before signing to get a better sense of their plans, their interests, their ability, how we can work on this together before using this money to do what I agree is really important and awesome work. But as you even agreed, Mika, we don't want to do the work and undo it to have to address issues later. So shouldn't we do our due diligence to
Yes,
talk to the state before signing this and figure that out?
we should, and we will, and we have 30 days to sign it, if I'm not mistaken,
Right.
so
30
We're go-
days from when?
from when they sent the letter, which was a couple of weeks ago.
So Andrea, if I can ask a slightly
Please.
different version of your question, and I started off by saying, what does this lock us into? So it does seem like there's two portions here. One is that engineering study. The engineering study may discover things,
Right.
I think I hear you say, that we could then add in to say, oh, so now we wanted to do this sidewalk, but we discovered first we're going to need to handle the drainage issue underneath it. That wasn't here in the scope. We need more money to do that. So that we wouldn't get to the point where we're actually putting in the sidewalk if we've discovered something during the process of this. And then I guess the other thing that's a little confusing is the map that's included here just sort of has a circle drawn around where we're talking about. And I do remember much more detailed maps when we had the presentation that night, but they were very, very difficult to read. So I'm not even clear on, I know they showed a cross street coming in kind of parallel with Litchfield and Amity. They were intending to have a street that came up the middle, pedestrian walkway, right? I don't know if that's in here or not.
It
I'm
is
not
not.
familiar with
It
that.
is not,
piece.
No.
okay. So the light's not there and that
This
pedestrian
is-
promenade
This
is
is
not there.
Lucy Street,
Okay,
Amity
Bradley
Road, and Bradley Road.
Correct.
all right, so nothing south on Amity Road from Lucy Street?
No, it goes all the way to, the sidewalk would go all the way to the Woodbridge Town line, approximately to the Woodbridge Town line.
Right.
Which is right about where the overpass for the Merritt Parkway is.
Yeah, New Haven has a sidewalk that comes
Correct.
right to the Woodbridge line.
Correct.
So we
Right.
connect to the.
Basically connected up.
Okay, all right. So that's south of Lucy Street.
That is south of
Okay.
Lucy Street. It
So-
goes, crest is south of Lucy Street.
Amity
goes
Road
across.
and Litchfield Turnpike all the way to the border, or
No.
just Amity Road?
Just Amity Road.
Okay.
The sidewalk would go all the way down Lucy Street and all the way down Bradley. On the east side,
East, south?
crest side, the crest,
Oh, and then on Lucy Street, you're talking about the south side of Lucy? Because I think there's already sidewalk on that.
yes, the south side of
north.
Lucy, correct.
Okay.
So the engineering part, that's the part that's being covered by the ARP grant?
Correct.
Okay, and that's gonna be done first,
Correct.
Correct.
before this work begins?
Right.
It has to be done, and we have to pay for it, and that's what the funds are being used for,
Okay.
correct.
So-
And did we have enough in there for that?
We do. Yeah.
I guess I couldn't figure out where that was, maybe you could point me to it on the sheet that we got, but where our contribution was.
We had
yeah.
like 1.1 million allocated to that. So Andrea, to answer your question, that's not the same as the funds that we're
Correct.
Correct.
allocated for other
They're different-
projects.
They're different, right.
We're still isolating this funding.
Correct, this is isolated.
1.1, or am I imagining?
It's a little less now,
Okay,
a little less, it's like 900,000.
okay. And that's gonna be all engineering, right? Yeah, all right. So we go out to RFP, that's the next step?
Correct.
As long as we approve this tonight?
Right.
So,
Correct.
do you want a motion, Mika,
Um,
to authorize the first selectman to sign? I don't
just
know
wanna
if we
check
still
with
have
Nick.
questions.
I'm not sure we need it, but we certainly, I'd be happy to have it.
I mean, there's no reason why you can't entertain one.
Exactly.
Okay. So a motion to authorize the first selectman to sign the document that's in front of us,
The commitment to fund letter, correct.
that document.
Second,
Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, so that would mean no consultation with the state prior to signing?
We've
Or
had,
is there a possibility to manage the engineer, considering the time sensitivity of the ARP funds, separate from this?
say that last one again, Andrea, I'm sorry. I didn't understand that.
No, is there a possibility, considering the time sensitivity of the ARP funds, and that being the required funding source for the engineer study, to approve that prior to signing the rest of this?
That's already approved.
That's already approved. The engineering study has to be done in order for us to gain these dollars. The engineering study will be when we will identify if there's infrastructure requirements beyond what we've already put in here. That's the requirement. And if there is additional work required based on the engineering study, we would then petition the state for the additional dollars to get that done. SCROG, we've been working with our Council of Governments on this, and they've identified that in the past, the state would fund that as part of the project if it's a requirement in order for the rest of the project to happen. So your concern in regards to the infrastructure will be addressed specifically at the time we do the engineering study, which is already, the funding for that is already in our hand and going to get done. Now we only have to select who will do that engineering study.
And we rely on SCROG. This is an annual program for them. They have many LOTSIP projects, even though it's new for us. We had one, I don't know, how long ago it was when Amy was here? We had a LOTSIP project. That was probably the last one. So it's not new for them, although it's somewhat new for us. So they're a good source of information for us, and they help us.
But I want to make sure
Tony,
you,
why would the state not want the engineering study done prior to putting dollar amounts
They're just-
associated with
They're just,
projects?
this is just a commitment to fund the project so we can move forward with the engineering. This is not a final, this is not by any means a
It's not
final
adding
amount.
Up to me, where if the project,
If we go
so
out
the
to bid,
project isn't for
Otherwise-
drainage or infrastructure then, and you're saying if you discover something in engineering, maybe it could be adopted
could,
or changed accordingly. But really, your goal here is that's not the intention behind this project. And I
Consider-
guess I'm saying, I do not, now, in that context, I do not support this if we're not properly addressing drainage and infrastructure prior to doing improvements that can potentially need to be removed in
Consi-
order to address root issues.
consider that we indeed are doing the engineering analysis prior to doing any work. That's the $900,000. And consider that it's $900,000 to do the work that's necessary to identify those types of things that you're referencing. So why would you go through $900,000 worth of expense and then submit a grant that may not be approved? And then you have no project. So the project is, you're submitting a request for grants for a project. You outlined, the consultant helped us outline what the scope of that project is. Knowing that, yes, you're gonna have to get deeper into it when you actually do the project, but do you feel this is a project worthwhile of funding? And the state is telling us, yes, we feel it's worthwhile of funding, but before you do it, you have to do an engineering study so we understand what's required, and you tell us what's required so that we can determine what the overall dollars required are gonna be. So that, I'm hoping that helps in terms of understanding. I think you have a legitimate and valid concern, and that's what's addressed with the engineering study.
And the state has to approve the design documents at 30% complete, 60% complete, 90% complete, before we go to the next level.
Right. So before you spend all your money, they're saying, okay, so far, so good.
Right, right.
You know, so, and checking to make sure that it's something they can fund and they should fund. So there's no, we're not saying, hey, we're gonna take this money, we're gonna do what we said we were gonna do without doing the necessary engineering work that would address specifically the concerns you brought up. I'm not, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just,
Yeah, if you're looking at me,
I do understand the confusion
No, I
of the
do.
state, you know, you're applying for a grant, but the state and us, everyone's aware this may change if there's infrastructure issues. So, I get what Andrea is saying. Wouldn't you want to
do I.
know that so that you could actually, put the line items in here that were absolutely necessary? And I don't think that the answer is just this is the state's process. But I mean, I think it's an excellent question about, making sure that this addresses the infrastructure concerns as well as safety and security, et cetera, and knowing that this study will be done so that we can add those and address those concerns.
right, and from a
But-
town
It's helpful.
perspective, it just protects us from having to spend the necessary dollars to identify those things prior to knowing we're gonna get the funding to do those things.
so what I'm hearing, maybe this helps, maybe not, is that there isn't an $8 million state grant for remediating flooding, but there is an $8 million grant for this kind of physical improvement, which might ultimately include more money to remediate the flooding because you can't do the project without remediating the flooding first.
Correct.
So our choice is basically $0 and complain about the flooding problem from now until whenever, or accept the $8 million and make sure that we get the flooding piece taken care of when we do it. Now that seems to me to be up onto us.
Or consult the state before signing to get a better sense.
I don't think LOTSIP cares about our flooding unless it affects their
I didn't
project.
hear that.
I said I don't think that LOTSIP, which is about the what is local transportation and
Capital improvement program.
capital improvement program, is a drainage program. I mean that if we went to them and so I think that fixing the drainage is clearly going to be in the engineering study because nobody's going to put $1 million or $2 million or $3 million worth of improvement onto something that's going to flood out tomorrow. We've already seen that flooding is not a small issue here in
Yeah,
Connecticut.
especially if you
But,
saw Oxford. Yeah.
I think that what this does is put us in a much better position because the project's been approved, which should, I'm assuming that gives us leverage to say we have to fix the flooding or we can't, or this $8 million is going to literally be washed down the drain. So to me, it's logically it would sound like what Mika is saying, that we're going to have leverage with the state to do something additional about that flooding because that's part of what it takes to do this capital improvement project. So
It also sounds like the engineering, if we're going out to RFP for engineering, that's the time to bring these concerns to the
Correct.
forefront, to
Correct.
make
Sure.
sure
That's
we're gonna get the
correct.
report we need, the data we need to make the
Correct.
decisions going forward.
Definitely.
So this is just getting it forward. And we were not going to commit the federal funds to this if we had no ability to build anything when the engineering study was done. So this is the first step, and this allows us to use our funds the way we intended. When we told the people of Woodbridge that that's where we were allocating it.
right, and I do know that the last board was very concerned about getting more return on the investment, which Tony, I congratulate you on supporting that.
Right.
And pushing it through into LOTSIP because looking at $8 million, that's a great return on investment, so thank you.
Yep.
And, we could have easily built lots of little things around town with the ARP money that we would have already forgotten about. I think this is something that's far better. We will no doubt be able to address the flooding issue that's been ongoing down there before anything else gets built. And we will have tremendous improvement based on what we actually paid consultants to tell us about, and also researched with an open group of citizens who came to those meetings. One of the few projects that we've really had that much public input on. And there've been lots of people who have reacted negatively to it, but by and large, I would say that the opinions of the people were listened to in those sessions. For those of us who went to the sessions, I would say that was pretty clear.
Can I ask oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. May I ask a question about the engineering study? Does that satisfy the requirements of the LATSIP guidelines to have a permit need determination and the environmental screening review? Or is that something that the Connecticut Department of Transportation does in addition to the engineering study that we are seeking?
Where are you reading exactly?
So that is the bottom of page 3. In accordance with the LATSIP guidelines, Connecticut DOT will initiate a permit need determination and environmental screening review. That is outside of our engineering study.
Yeah, and that's breaking down like what we're paying for, what they're paying for, right?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of the answer, but we can certainly find out when we meet with the engineer.
I mean, either way, it sounds like that will be satisfied or we will get extra assessment.
Right, because the sewer is a utility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's, maybe Andrea, that's where your question comes in.
I don't think so, but I don't know. But that to me isn't, that sounds more like an environmental impact statement than anything else. But I don't know, maybe our attorney can speak to that.
I mean, I'm looking at the same thing everyone else is, and I mean, without further research, I can't give us any more details tonight.
Mika, just being cognizant of time and noting that we have some folks here for public comment, we had a motion and a second. I think we've had a good bit of discussion. I think we're ready to call this to vote.
Is there any more? We will call the vote. All in favor of moving forward with signing the commitment to fund letter? All opposed? Karen, you got that? Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda, prior to the town council report, we'll move into public comment. So if there's anyone from the public who would like to make comment, I invite them up to the chair in the middle here.
Mika, Andrew also wanted to make us aware a letter might have come through around 4:30. I don't know if you got it.
Amy Morella, 184 Rimmon Road. I can't resist pointing out, if you've got flooding concerns downtown, you can't necessarily solve them with sewers.
Understood.
It might mean, and it could be important in this project, that it might mean that you need a drainage swell like what they're doing at Bradley Road for the current development, because we have a consigned sewer system that they're trying to separate in the New Haven area from having both stormwater and people's sewage going into the treatment plant. So I came actually for 2 comments, and I have 1 extra, actually realizing the date today. The first is, the first 2 are about your process of looking at changes in our town through growth. We've already seeing indications that TPC's major regulatory changes will actually bring about changes to privately held lands without developing publicly owned property. The example of that is that a developer recently discussed with Town Plan and Zoning his interest in developing several acres at the New Haven town border. This is off of Fountain Street and Ansonia Road. That development shows that, to my mind and my recommendation to you, that the town, as it looks at growth, should really know what other parcels are out there that are privately owned, and that as a result of the massive zoning changes that were passed by TBZ a few years ago, could be developed and make substantial change in what our town looks like. And those parcels could be either undeveloped or ripe for more intense development. You are, as I know, retaining a new planner, and I would think that this is an important part of what their work should be, is to look at these. And I'm not saying every 1 acre lot, but the current one under discussion is just under 6 acres. I don't know, the planner could probably advise you what is a reasonable size, but I do think it's worth doing. Specifically, at the time the regs were changed, there were several of us who recommended a full build-out analysis of what the regs could bring. And while that was not adopted, I think this piece of a build-out analysis is timely now that we have a concrete example of somebody who wants to develop in a more intense way on privately held land. So that's my first suggestion with respect to growth. The second is that as you look at growth, please be sure to consider the related cost of increased public services. I know schools are an issue and on your radar screen, but you need to also consider police, fire, and public works. For example, often developers will say that they're going to maintain their roads privately, but there's a mechanism over time for them to hand them over to the town. If you have an increase in the actual length of roads in town, you could end up having to need not only another person, but another truck, et cetera. I mean, so I hope you will look at both sides of the ledger and consider not just budget growth and growing the grand list, but net impact for existing taxpayers. I do have one other comment because it's a September 11th, and as I walked into this building, I could not help remember that I was here on September 11th, 2001. And so there was a substantial impact on our town, although we were far away. You all probably know that there's a bench dedicated to a young man whose family put it there on the Fitzgerald track because he died. But there was also a need on that time to address various concerns, and one of them was that our fire department was supposed to have put on alert because, as I understand it, and perhaps others know it more concretely, but I think the time was they thought they were going to have a massive rescue operation. So folks from, say, Stanford were going to go into the city, and then our guys were going to help to cover Stanford. I mean, we weren't going to actually go into the city, our firefighters, but there was this sense that there was going to be this massive rescue operation, which sadly was not the case. So my point is that September 11th, 2001 matters to this town. We did have a memorial a year later, and I hope that when we get to 25 years out in 2026, that you all would keep in mind the importance of having a memorial. I think it's worth remembering. This very town hall is dedicated as a memorial hall to all those who died in wars. That at the time it was built shortly after World War I. Our history matters. People thought then that would be it. But so I hope that you will think about September 11th, 2026. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there a sign-in sheet or not? I'll have written comments I can hand you, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Name and address, I forgot that part.
Good evening, First Selectman Cardozo, members of the Board of Selectmen, Town Council, Town Administrator. My name is Scott Hunter, and I live at 52 Indian Trail. I'll be making two public comments tonight. First, as Vice Chair of the Economic Development Commission, I'll be expressing my dissent regarding the EDC's recommendation about the Steering Committee for the Brownfield Area-Wide Revitalization Planning Grant, BAR. The comment relates to the CCW Master Plan Update G2S5, which is the first item on your agenda after public comment. My second comment will be made from my perspective as a dedicated community member. The comment relates to the Lucy Street lease assumption, Alpha Capital, which is the third item on your agenda after public comment. I note that there's no goal, strategy, or tactic is specifically tied to this agenda item. I hope this was just a scrivener's omission, as housing for our most vulnerable residents, including the elderly, disabled, low and moderate income families, must be a priority in any forward-looking strategic plan, which is your second agenda item after public comment. So public comment number 1, CCW Master Plan. During the Board of Selectmen meeting on August 14th, some selectmen suggested that the BOS should steer the bar planning process. In fact, these selectmen cited Cooper Robertson as supporting this approach. At the EDC meeting on August 22nd, a resolution was passed recommending that the steering committee be made up of town staff, 4 to 5 members, including a TPC representative, Christine Sullivan, and members of the Economic Development Commission, Housing, 2030, COOPOP, Board of Selectmen, Recreation, and Conservation, with those members and numbers to be decided by the Board of Selectmen. My dissent centers on the bar planning process, which was designed to foster a non-political, community-driven, locally led effort to revitalize a large area, mostly in Woodbridge, but also with a small portion in New Haven, that is significant, a regional center and urban hub that supports our economy. The bar planning process was designed for technical and strategic planning, not to serve as a forum for political debate or maneuvering. In fact, as noted in the bar planning grant FAQs, which I provide here with my written comment, the BOS or any existing committee or commission is prohibited from serving as the steering committee for the bar planning process. A bar planning grant aims to transform brownfield properties from liabilities into community assets by developing a strategic plan that includes market analysis, infrastructure studies, cost-benefit analysis, environmental reviews, community visioning, and cleanup cost estimates and conceptual designs for redevelopment. It prioritizes sites for cleanup and reuse while developing an implementation plan aligned with economic and community development goals. The bar planning process is not intended to be political. The former Country Club of Woodbridge is where all these issues converge: the people, the zoning regulations, and the historical decisions that have shaped our community. This property embodies the ongoing challenges in how we approach development and zoning. Our town's involvement in a civil rights case reminds us that our zoning practices are under scrutiny. As the only town adjacent to a major urban hub and regional center, Woodbridge continues to rely on economic zoning policies that contribute to many of its challenges. This makes transparency and objectivity in the bar planning process not just important, but essential. The decisions we make today will shape the future of Woodbridge zoning and economic development. To ensure that success of this process, it must remain free from political influence, or we risk repeating the very mistakes that have brought us to this point. It is critical that the EDC be empowered to proceed independently with the bar planning process. Time is of the essence, and with the right approach, this can be a transformative moment for Woodbridge. Please confirm tonight that the EDC will establish the steering committee, collaborate with town planners and the master planner, and swiftly begin the bar planning process with input from qualified representatives nominated by the outlined various committees and commissions. By empowering the EDC to take the lead in the process and ensuring a non-political, community-focused, locally led, and technically driven approach, the board can deliver real, tangible results that benefit the entire town. Sorry, it's going to take about 2 minutes more than the 3 minutes that you usually get. Public comment number 2 on the Lucy Street assumption and Alpha Capital. It is crucial for our town to actively support affordable housing. Without proper attention and advocacy, the outcome of the William H. Warner Elderly Housing Community could have been disastrous. I hope you had the opportunity to review my public comments delivered to the Chaffa Board meeting in Rocky Hill almost 4 months ago on May 30th, 2024, and more recently to the Woodbridge Housing Committee on September 4th, 2024. I've attached transcripts of these comments for those of you who may not have seen or been aware of this ongoing effort. These comments outline the challenging journey that led you to tonight's agenda item. As you may recall, the need for thorough vetting was emphasized at your April meeting this year. Fortunately, my public comment to the Chaffa Board led to a tabling of the mortgage modification approval, which was the last key hurdle to Alpha Capital assuming the debt. This delay allowed time for Alpha Capital and Tyler Smith's true nature to be exposed, hopefully leading Chaffa to prohibit them from continuing their business dealings. And in turn, you can ensure the town is working with partners that align with our values and protect our most vulnerable residents. Just as Chaffa is no doubt reviewing how this decision could have been made despite the available information, this Board of Selectmen must reflect on how we narrowly how we nearly moved forward with a harmful decision and instead will take corrective action. Both issues, the BART planning process and Warner, require the town staff work in close consultation with experts to navigate these complex issues effectively. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just make a question for clarification? Mr. Hunter, you said that you,
Scott, please.
Scott, you said that you were speaking to us in your capacity as EDC Vice Chair.
Expressing a dissent for a resolution. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand you were not representing EDC
Absolutely
with your
not.
statement. Okay, and then
Yeah,
there was.
let me further explain that.
Well,
The-
hold on one second.
But I
Hold
want to
on one
answer your
second.
question fully.
Yeah, but I just want to note one other thing. I don't know that we have that recommendation as a document. I don't know if others have it. I watched the meeting, so I know what you're referring to. I don't know if the rest of the board is aware.
We don't have a document that,
Okay,
that they've provided us with that particular, with that particular information.
so just some context. Go right ahead.
So the minutes are up. So they're not formalized minutes, but the minutes are up. And as you watch that, you could see the vote. And there was a non-unanimous vote.
What are not formalized minutes? Do you mean
In
they
other words,
haven't
the board
been,
needs to approve them.
they haven't approved it yet?
Well, in other words, the meeting occurred, right? The recommendation was voted on, and then it's in the minutes, and then, of course, as you know, you will approve your minutes. That's when you get a formal, because there may be some folks that feel that those should be amended as it was said in a different way.
Understood.
So, but the bottom line is the intent, is I read word for word the actual resolution. And it wasn't unanimous. There was one dissent, and I was here to give that dissent. Dissent can be powerful, and I won't go into the sort of the internet stuff that you can talk about how dissents can be powerful. But, they challenge groupthink, and, they can produce innovation. And so I felt it important as a vice chair of that to allow you to hear a dissent, because I don't know if you're all tuning in. We did,
Well, I think
thank
we're
you.
hearing the dissent before we're hearing the recommendation, but that's. all the words
Again,
that
it's
went
in the
out.
minutes and you're hearing the dissent. I think it's important to hear the dissent.
It's not in the minutes until they're passed, because the minutes aren't public until they've been approved. The motion is supposed to be on file with the town clerk after it has been voted on. Before the actual minutes may be approved by the commission. Sometimes commissions don't meet for months on end, and the minutes are delayed by many,
The
many
minutes
months.
are posted on the website, okay? And so the minutes and the vote of the committee is posted. And so it'll be up to that committee to approve or deny, to approve those minutes.
The
Okay.
EDC meets tomorrow. Thank you very
Yeah.
much for your comments. The EDC does meet tomorrow, so if they need to formally put together a resolution, I'm sure they'll take care of that. But their vote was taken, and the vote was taken we can discuss that.
What do you mean that the motions should have been?
The motion
submitted?
has to be on file with the town clerk. That's the way it's supposed to work. That's what it says in the ordinance that
Well-
formulates those commissions.
My point was more that I don't know that the Board of Selectmen received that document. We did get a recommendation from Housing, that is in our packet, but I wanted you to know that EDC's recommendation, unless I missed it, is not in our packet.
That's a good,
Okay.
that's a good point. But they,
Yeah, but people are
until they've
talking
been
to us, we
approved-
need to receive the
Until they're
document, so we
approved, they
know.
aren't minutes. They are a draft.
I think
Yeah.
the public has the opportunity to say what they want to say when they want to say it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we heard today. So
Absolutely.
as far as the resolution, if the EDC chooses tomorrow to formalize the document and send it to the Board of Selectmen, it's something that we will take up and we will discuss and we will have on the agenda. We don't have that right now.
Right.
We don't have a document from EDC right now.
So-
And if we do, it's not something that I'm aware of.
So Mika, with regard to, I guess we're just doing an update on that, so we wouldn't need to amend
next-
our agenda to discuss it?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Actually, as relates to the next agenda item, which will, is there any additional public comment first?
Well, were any received via email? I thought one was
Karen?
sent to you, Mika, this afternoon.
It has to be received before 3 o'clock, and if there was something sent, I can look at my emails now, but it is supposed to be received before 3 o'clock on the day of the meetings.
Okay. I was also
I have
included
not
on
seen it.
that, and it was not sent by 3. but it was intended to be public comment.
I will,
So-
lea-
If it's important information,
I will leave it up to the board to decide whether you would like to, there is an email that I did receive that I have here that was sent to me by James Urbano, at 4:58. I'll let the board
I'll
decide whether they want
abstain
it.
from voting.
I would like to hear what it is, if it's possible.
Comments concerning the needed infrastructure in the business district.
Oh, so we've already disposed of that on our agenda.
But this is during public comment. Do we want to hear this public comment here now? Or do we want to take it up at our next meeting?
No, I don't, let's hear it.
That's
I
what
mean,
Okay, I didn't want to be the one to say that, so I don't want to
Okay.
influence it, so I'm fine with hearing it.
Right.
Is everybody else?
I want to hear what Jim has to say.
Mika, concerning the recently announced grant for the business district, please consider the need for the following hard infrastructure improvements which should be prioritized over cosmetic improvements. I'd appreciate it if you could enter these points into the BOS's public comment today. The storm drainage system along Lower Amity Road, including the culvert near the Wells Fargo building, is undersized and deficient. Several commercial properties in the area experience flooding during periods of heavy rain. This deficiency is an impediment to redevelopment. The intersection at Amity and Bradley is hazardous during heavy traffic periods. See the attached petition reflecting the sense of the area businesses. There's a recognized need for a traffic light and crosswalk there. Bus stop patrons are endangered crossing at night. The light should be a priority, with the lack of a light another impediment to development. The business district has at its best asset a scenic setting, with West Rock State Park dominating the view. The recent installation of taller utility poles with larger utility cables has a blighted effect on the area and actually throughout Woodbridge. Woodbridge has the opportunity to show leadership by placing the utilities underground, also making the area less susceptible to storm-related power outages. Thank you. Mr. Urbano, 245 Amity Road. Jim Urbano, 245 Amity Road. So Karen, I'll forward this to you because it went to me and Allison, and we'll enter it as public comment for today. Okay. Any other public comment? Thank you, Andrea, for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is the CC Master Plan update. In this particular instance, there's two things.
We need to go back
Oh,
to.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, we forgot the, thank you. Attorney report. Sorry, Nick.
Thanks, Mika. Just a real quick update for this board on the potential scenic road designation of Westward Road. You'll recall at your last meeting, several members of the Conservation Commission appeared before you and indicated that they were intending to apply to this board for a scenic road designation under both our local code and state law. And in order to do so, they would need to obtain the consent of all of the property owners on Westward Road, and they had submitted a draft correspondence for town attorney's office to review that they would be sending out to those property owners to effectuate their consent, to sign and return, basically. So what's in the packet was just a markup that I did. I made a couple of relatively minor edits to the proposed letter. At this point, it's in a form that I'm comfortable with. I think the next step would be just for the Conservation Commission to put a simple, town seal, letterhead on it, and then send it out. And then assuming they do get a majority of the property owners on the street to agree to the designation as a scenic road, that will come back before this board as a formal agenda item.
Okay.
That's all.
I had a question about the letter, and perhaps people know that they can call the town, but what if someone had a question about the designation and about what it meant to their property? Because the letter asked them to sign it. Were we gonna leave somewhere where, if there's any questions about this, a contact for them to reach out to?
Yeah, it would be it's technically the Conservation Commission that would be bringing this application to this board. So, technically, it's on the applicant, so to speak, to make those sorts of arrangements. I know
Okay.
we're saying here, let's make this letter as efficient as possible. I mean, certainly we can speak to and explain more of the details that are what a scenic road designation means, as that's outlined in our code. I mean, long story short, what it means is that we, the town, and public utilities cannot just go, unless it's a public safety or health hazard issue. For example, the utilities don't just have free reign to go and trim trees in the public right-of-way that are overhanging and a potential impact on their wiring without first a plan in place and then some sort of supervision while that's being done. So it's not as severe is the wrong word, but it's not as expansive as, for example, a historic property or historic district designation that would actually restrict the property owner in some ways from improving the exterior of their property, things like that. This is really starts and ends at the road right-of-way.
I just imagine,
but-
you know, as a homeowner, without knowing those two distinctions, I might have a similar question. Is this similar to historic? Would I not be able to paint my house a certain color, et cetera?
Right.
And I just would want to know who to reach out to
Yeah, I mean,
to ask that question.
I think when we send this back to conservation, we can just add to them that, you know, I could suggest to them that they would include one of their members as a contact person, and then in the event that they're unable to adequately answer the questions, they could reach back out to Mika, who can kick the question over to me, or however you'd like to handle it.
We have a general mailbox that we use for people who want to just reach out to the town type of thing. We could also see about leveraging that as putting that on there, and then basically with the indication that leave an email, and the next time conservation gets together, we will present your question to the Conservation Commission for a response, so they know that somebody's not going to be calling them back the next day, and it really is conjunction with what the Conservation Commission does. So that's something with Allison and with Karen we can work on, if I'm not mistaken. But I would, yes, that's what we can do. The good news is it's limited number of residents we're talking about.
That's all I have.
I had two questions
Yeah,
with
sure.
regard to this. So we talked a little bit last time, and it sounds to me like until they actually come back to us with the results of their petition, perhaps all this waits until that happens. But you did mention, again, that there's protection from utility just coming in and cutting whatever they feel like cutting. Over and above what it already exists for everyone throughout the town already, or do we not yet know exactly what level of protection this does over and above?
The
'Cause-
public utilities will always have a level of authority once it reaches a certain safety threshold.
Right.
And
But prior to that, our tree warden does get a plan, if I'm not mistaken, and is notified, and the homeowners are also notified, but the tree warden has some power. Is that right?
he should. I mean,
Yeah.
statutorily he does, and that is part of what his role is supposed to be.
Right. So how does it change when the road becomes,
It's not
Designated.
just applicable to public utilities, it's another layer, let's say, that the public utilities need to make sure that they're in compliance with by consulting with the tree warden. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and then we get residents calling the town saying, hey, why is the utility outside?
and boy, do we get
Right.
residents contacting the town.
So that is, you know, further insurance that the tree warden is involved as he's supposed to be when it comes to public utilities. But then it also affects things such as structural elements of the road, like the grading of the road itself, if there's a bridge, or if there's certain signposts or landmarks, so to speak, structural landmarks, they cannot just be removed or destroyed for no good reason, essentially. It needs to be, again, related
Right.
back to necessary public health safety from our DPW or otherwise, if it, again, reaches that threshold.
So things like interconnection with, let's say, a new road was going to be put to a subdivision, then this designation would preclude that happening, unless it's for public safety reasons. that sort of thing.
Would a scenic road designation on Westward Road preclude some future subdivision attaching to it? No, not just on its face, not without,
So we did it on Baldwin Road, and the impetus for that was to make sure that we had some protections in place if a neighboring municipality was going to put in a road, or even a driveway, actually, is what they were contemplating.
well, it would affect the grading of a road, it would affect the curb cuts, so it would
Sure.
impact, and, I mean, that type of development would be subject to compliance with this code. So like the public utilities, hey, we have a law on the books that says you need to make sure you crossed all your Ts and dotted all your Is and gotten the appropriate approvals before you're actually gonna start cutting into this and
Right.
building this development. Those approvals come from our end, not, in your example, the other town. Let's say they wanna move forward, they have all their approvals. I mean, this
Sure.
still brings us into our realm of
Right.
authority.
So we can make this all clear to people once we actually receive the petition. So my other question is, if someone else is interested in doing this with a similar effort on another road, they can kind of take that letter, they don't need to come specifically and get special advice, they can just use this as a blueprint, and if they wanted to do the same thing, they could do that.
Absolutely.
All right, good.
Yeah, it's the process right under our local code, which
Yeah,
is.
do it once, you don't need to do it multiple times. People can just ask for that document and they can get going.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even, I mean, it was nice enough that the Conservation Commission came in and said, hey, we're thinking about sending this out, can we please get the town or the town attorney's okay before we do so? I mean, that was probably appropriate on their part, but it doesn't have to be in a particular form. I mean, what the code says is you need to get a signed, clear consent from an owner, each owner, or a majority at least, with their name, their address, their signature, and a clear statement that they agree, they understand the proposed designation as a scenic road and agree to it. So, I mean, it could be as simple as that. You know, the filler and the substance is sort of more up in the air, but yes, someone can take what conservation is doing here and use this same process to propose a scenic road elsewhere.
Terrific. That's time well spent then. Thank you.
Sure.
Questions, comments? Thank you, Nick.
Sure.
Next item on the agenda is CCW Master Plan Update, and in this particular instance, there were really two items that we were going to cover on this. And I was going to suggest that the discussion as far as the committee not be one of them. What I'd like to do is, one, first let you know that we haven't signed a contract with them. We just received back from our attorneys today a response. They sent us a contract. It was really their contract. We responded with something that was a little bit more, better suited to us and what we were looking for. They responded with any changes they made, and our attorney reviewed that. And just today, earlier today, indicated that they don't see that there's anything in there that we should be overly concerned about. So we feel like we can move forward. So the next step is for us to execute a contract, so that the contract will come up and we can care for that in our next meeting once we have all of that cared for officially. So you'll be seeing a copy of what the document is, obviously, prior to that. The second part of it is I'd like to suggest that we consider a special meeting for us to take time to discuss the next steps as far as what we do with this, and with the hope that by that time we might actually have something that we know we're going to enter into business, or we're going to engage the consultant. So generally speaking, if we have a special meeting, it's usually the fourth Wednesday of the month. We wanted to see if that was convenient, or if for everyone, and we could do that, or if you would prefer that we wait until next month and have it as part of our regular meeting.
Well, is it possible to choose a different day? Because I think Living Treasures
You're
is
right.
that.
And I'm sorry, that's actually a note that was made for me.
Okay.
The Wednesday is the Living Treasure, so it would have to be another date beside what we would normally do.
Right.
We could do it at the dinner.
That would be fun. That would be entertaining. It could be entertaining.
We'd have public comment.
Sure would.
So if we'd like to select a date, or we could try to coordinate that afterwards, but that's my recommendation at this point. I'd like to focus on that as a single item. I shouldn't say as a single item, because if there are small administrative things, of course, I'll try to add those too, so we don't have to wait for the next time.
I think that's a good idea. I do think that the time period between now and our next Board of Selectmen meeting is starting to fill up between Living Treasures and whatever the POCD process is going to entail.
As well as Halloween and.
No, Halloween is after
Oh,
our next
October,
Board of
that's
Selectmen.
October. Shoot, thank you.
1 month at a time.
So,
Yeah, if we can select a time that we can all make in person or remotely.
Like Monday or Tuesday evening that week?
Or Thursday?
Of the
I can do
same
Thursday at 1
week.
o'clock. But if you would carry on.
we would look at the, I'm
Election
looking in the evenings, I know there's Thursday evening, the 26th, there's a police commission meeting, that's a special meeting that I've been asked to attend. Wednesday is the Living Treasure. Tuesday evening, certainly from my perspective, is open. Monday evening, the 23rd, from my perspective, is open, and Friday evening, the 27th, is also open.
Monday or Tuesday?
And if Thursday is the only day that everybody can make it, I'm certain that I can work something out with them.
I can't make Thursday.
Can't make Thursday, okay, so that's.
So maybe we could just do this by email
Email, yeah.
after, yeah,
Okay,
so that we all,
but if you would, take a look at that, you can expect that tomorrow you'll be asked when we can do it. Otherwise, we're into the first week of October. So, if that's what we need to do, that's what we need to do, but I would like this to be a topic we discuss as much as we need to discuss.
I'm lousy at reading my emails, but I am good on Monday and Tuesday, so.
Sounds good. All right, we'll work it out. We know how to get you, David. All right. Any other
Mika,
questions?
what about next Wednesday, the 18th, if that fourth week is too busy for people?
I'm away.
Sheila's away.
Okay,
I'm okay.
I just
but-
thought we could be quick
Yeah,
and get
yeah,
it
no,
over.
you're right. I don't blame you. I appreciate it.
Because emails can be hard.
So what we'll do is we'll look at the week of the 23rd, either Monday, Tuesday, or we'll look at the week of the 30th.
It did sound like, what I'm hearing is that Monday or Tuesday could work for nearly everyone. When I say Monday,
Monday's better than Tuesday.
I'm hearing Mondays.
Yeah.
So we'll look to target Monday, so if you can identify that tomorrow, we'll ask about confirming.
Is that the third Monday and the
Monday the
Woodbridge Board of
23rd.
Ed?
Monday, the 23rd.
Yeah, but is the Woodbridge Board of Ed here? Because they meet on the third
The
Monday.
fourth Monday.
That's the fourth Monday, okay, good.
It is the fourth Monday.
As long as they didn't shift.
For
The
Board of
Monday
Ed.
we're talking about is the fourth Monday.
Yes, but the Board of Ed meets on, is it the last Monday or is it the fourth Monday? Oh, no,
The
third.
Board of Ed
third.
meets on the 16th.
16th, third Monday, correct. Okay.
And we're looking at 5 o'clock, or might we go a little later?
5 is good.
Because it's not gonna be a 5-hour meeting like our normal meetings.
How about we
And-
say
and
5:30?
I just,
Give
some
everybody
people
a
have to
time.
hurry to get here at 5. Not me,
I agree.
but
No, I'm here, so,
I work
but if
from
it's
home
more
on Monday.
convenient for everybody, Andrea, 5:30? Okay,
I can make either time, 5 or 5:30 work
Okay.
on Monday.
I'm good.
5 is fine, if you guys are good with 5.
5.
I'm here at 5.
5 on Monday.
We're a
Sounds
little
good.
fresher at 5 o'clock.
So, what we will be saying is right now, based on this very short conversation, it looks like tentatively we're scheduled for the 23rd, and we'll send out an email tomorrow confirming that. Thank you. Strategic plan update, next item on the agenda, number 8.
Sure. We did have a meeting. We managed to get a meeting in on Monday, the September 9th. We had some general discussion there, and then there was a draft of a summary document, which was actually created immediately after we last talked about the strategic plan. So last month, we sort of took a month off from talking about the strategic plan. But back in July, we had talked about needing some sort of shorter executive summary that really punched up what was in this plan so that people would not have to read it all, but folks who like to read the details could then read the details. So that could go out if you guys are ready for a summary document to go out. One thing that I will note, and I noted it at the committee meeting as well, is I did hear the EDC speak to wanting to know what the Board of Selectmen's intent was with regard to what EDC works on. And that's in there. So I just wanted to make sure that we're being timely with our communication. We approved this in June. The more information we can get out, the sooner we can get it out. I know, Mika, you're going to speak a little bit about your plan for getting all boards and commissions up to speed. So maybe let's hold this and then hear from you about that.
What I'll say about the strategic plan is I did send out an email to the EDC chairs, specifically indicating that there are items on goal 1 that we will look to them. So they're meeting tomorrow. I wanted to get them an opportunity if they can get it on their agenda tomorrow to talk about the strategic plan. So I sent a copy and asked them if they could do that either at this meeting or at their next meeting. So right now, I'm not sure which one they're going to do, but I wanted you to know that that's the case. And to that end, I think what we need to do as we're meeting is, or even beyond our meetings, is to keep in mind when we're working on a topic, or if there's a topic that's of importance or priority, that if there's a commission involved, that we make sure we reach out to them and they understand that they're involved in what they're doing. Any other questions, comments? Good.
So is it the sense of everyone that, I mean, we were just simply going to insert the link because the document is now online. So people who are curious have probably already discovered it on the website. But this summary could go out potentially with that link inserted if everyone's comfortable with what we're seeing in the summary.
What I'd like to suggest is that we hold off on putting it on there until such time as everybody feels comfortable and has reviewed it. So if you've all done that already, great. If not, let's get that done so that if there's any suggestions for changes, we make them.
So here's what I can suggest, since it does dovetail with our CCW. So what is the Board of Selectmen's concern with regard to the former CCW property? It's right there in that strategic plan. It's also in the summary. So perhaps at the meeting that
Yes.
we're going to have, this is when we could, once we kind of decide where we're going with that, we could make sure that our executive summary matches what we're deciding, and then we could approve it then,
Works well for me. Okay,
if it pleases the
Andrea?
board.
good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Sounds good. Our next item on the agenda, number 9, is Lucy Street lease assumption with the current owners and Alpha Capital. This particular instance that we've heard some public comment on this, and you've also received information from me with regards to just additional information related to this particular topic. Just to go over quickly, in April, we did approve with contingencies the arrangement for the lease to be transferred to Alpha Capital. And some of those contingencies were checking with CHAFA, some documentation that we needed to review and things of that nature. Since then, we've obviously had a considerable additional amount of information that a number of discussions with CHAFA and public comment, as well as information that has been articles and information that we've identified, podcasts, things of that nature from the media, through social media and other ways. So to that end, based on what I've seen, I'd like to make a motion to rescind the BOS April 10th approval with contingencies of Alpha Capital's request to assume the lease for the Lucy Street property currently held by Woodbridge Elderly Housing Limited Partnership, based on new information and discussions with CHAFA, the public, news media, and other sources.
Second.
Is there any comments or discussions on this?
So I have a couple of concerns, but they're probably legal in nature. So we should not discuss legal concerns on a pending matter in public session. So a motion to go into executive session and talk to our attorney? A motion to add to the agenda to have a motion to go into executive session.
No, there isn't actually any sort of litigation or claim pending at this point. So I don't think we have grounds at this point to discuss this
Under executive
privately
session.
as a board. I mean, I can certainly have conversations with any of you independently, but you know, I don't think we can go into executive session to discuss this.
Okay, so I guess I could ask just in general terms, two things. One, are we actually rescinding or are we reconsidering the motion to ask you to proceed? The previous motion was not to approve it, it was to have you proceed with the negotiations, right? So we didn't actually have a motion to approve, from my memory.
It was pending Choppa's approval, right? I mean, that moved
Which-
forward with it.
No, it was,
Do we need a
to
motion at all?
approve Alpha Capital's request to assume the lease for the Lucy Street property currently held by Woodbridge Elderly Partnership contingent on town council reviewing, approving, and town council reviewing / approving all documents and materials, a follow-up with Chief Chaffa, and a signed letter of intent from Alpha Capital. The board also authorized First Selectman to sign any legal documents required as reviewed by town council. So yes, we need to rescind.
So that approval, all those conditions have been met already, and now we're rescinding?
No,
The-
No, Choppa didn't.
no, they haven't,
Okay.
that's the point.
So do we need to act? You didn't get the approvals, and therefore the whole thing just, it's moot. You don't have a
Our
contract.
Our suggestion, just to be extra clear and transparent, I mean, if the board's of the mindset, it shouldn't make a difference. If the board wants to, I mean, my recommendation would be the board to formally rescind that prior authorization so that there can be no interpretation that we are proceeding with signature with that particular entity at this point.
All right, so, and we wouldn't be entering into legal jeopardy by doing that,
No.
as opposed to just letting it die?
No, I mean, conditions haven't been met, and by this board taking this sort of proposed action to rescind, it doesn't put us, in my opinion, in any further legal jeopardy or opening the door to some sort of claim there. I mean, it's further insulating us.
So
against
maybe
that.
friendly amendment to your motion, that due to the fact that the conditions have not been met, we're taking the action to rescind.
Well, I think.
Does that help?
I mean, I don't know exactly how the motion was initially framed, but I think that's how Mika represented that. The rescission is happening because the conditions haven't been met,
Period.
in large part because of this additional information and input that we've received. I mean, the background rationale, I don't see it hurting, but
Well,
no,
it's in
the
the public
conditions have
record.
not been met.
No, I-
Has not approved it. It is a required prerequisite for this board to issue its
I
formal.
see no issue with adding and due to conditions, and conditions outlined not having been met.
Just due to conditions not being met, the board rescinds its prior authorization. Because I
I,
honestly haven't had time to,
just as we're discussing this, I think we just should rescind it. I don't know that conditions not having been met makes it better or worse. I mean, does that mean they're still gonna try to get the conditions met so that they would somehow work in through the back door? I would just say, I don't see the difference. I mean, I don't see the difference, or that lets us off the hook in any way. I think to put conditions in there muddles the issue. So I kind of like the way you originally stated it.
Okay?
all right, then I guess my only other question is our agenda clear that a member of the public would understand what we're doing tonight? For example, the person whose contract is about to be rescinded.
There is no contract.
Okay, so the person who had proposed to us that they have a contract, would they say, I got no public notice that you were discussing it tonight, or that you were gonna do this?
No,
It's here,
the agenda
right?
was reviewed with me prior to posting, and I'm comfortable with how it was
Good.
represented.
Okay, thank you.
Additional comments, Andrea? Anything?
Are we, just a question, like, what's happening in the interim? With,
I've been,
you know, with, meaning with the Lucy Street apartments, is there someone else better suited?
We've identified that there are other organizations who are better qualified, have more experience, have done this type of thing, understand different processes that would allow for additional dollars, so there can be some improvements, things of that nature. We know that they're in what we've asked for, and I've had conversations with the owner and was under the impression that he agreed that what we would do without going through this, that he would open it up to a broader opportunity, open the opportunity up to a broader base of potential people to take it, or organizations to deal with this. And he ultimately indicated that that's, he felt that this was his preferred method. It is his. All we can do is suggest that we offer to help. However, we do have the ability to not approve it, in which case Chaffo would not approve it, and whatever processes takes place is on their side. But from our perspective, it's not going to happen unless we approve it. And what we would like to do is, and I have offered to work with him in terms of putting together a bid process, a process that opens the opportunity up to other organizations who do this, who can do this. This is very, very critical from our perspective. And I've been meeting on a regular basis with a number of the residents down there who have also expressed concern in regards to the situation, both the existing situation and moving into the other situation, particularly in light of some of the things that have come up in public, in terms of articles and things of that nature. So in answer to your question, I will continue to work with the current owner, to see what we can do to try to achieve whatever goals he might have, and move forward with a partner that is more experienced and capable in terms of what we're looking to have, what we would like to see for the residents of this community.
I'm sorry. The nature of our relationship with this community, the town has to approve it, or is it something like the town has first right of refusal when
No.
the contract changes? Like, do we have ability to assume this project?
We don't.
We don't. Okay. Thank you.
So it's literally just an approval of what's happening here. The board would be approving an assignment of the underlying ground lease.
Okay.
So we own the property, we own the land. The landlord owns the facility and the infrastructure, which would become ours at the conclusion of the lease, but at this point, it would be the lease to be on that property is between the town and the current property owner, the current landlord, Mr. Capone. And so the request would be to assign that underlying lease to, now instead of Mr. Capone, it would go to whatever new entity is acceptable ultimately to this board.
But the town would never be the leasee of that, even
In the
I
event-
mean,
an entity of the town.
At the end of the lease,
at the end of the lease, and I mean, there's nothing that says if the town had funds available that it couldn't try to come into this deal itself, but that's beyond my pay grade.
We will look at those scenarios, Maria, to see exactly what we can do, where my interest lies is in trying to affect the most productive and advantageous arrangement for the residents as quickly as possible. This will delay things, and that's something that I've communicated to the residents, is if we take this action, and which I feel is very important we do take, it will delay, it's delaying the process in terms of any change at all. In all fairness, one of the things I did want to mention is I also have notified and had conversations with Alpha Capital, in which case, and they have come back and said, well, we'll lower the increases and we'll look to try to do more improvements and we'll, et cetera, et cetera. But in light of the information that we've collected and we've seen, it just doesn't seem like it's a good fit, period.
It doesn't seem like that's been their business model.
Correct. And they really don't have any experience with affordable elderly homes. So that's also a factor as well. Now, one of the hesitations on my part, frankly, in terms of making an offer, is we don't either.
Right.
You know, so it's one of those things, if we were to even entertain something like that, there's a lot of legwork that needs to be done, and that's, I think, something we're going to start to look into. Any other questions, comments? We've had a motion and a second. We'll take a vote. All in favor? Unanimous. Motion carries. Our next item on the agenda is the USDA compost grant. And I think the one most qualified to get into this a little bit, Steve, we want to get into it, or do you mind?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah. So we, as the town of Woodbridge, have submitted a grant proposal to the USDA, which was due last week on September 4th. We submitted it with the support of SCROG, the Council of Governments, and the hope with this grant, the application, is to do a pilot food scraps diversion program, and this relates to our strategic plan, Goal 2, Strategy 7, Tactic D, I believe it is, where we talked about needing to divert food scraps from our municipal waste. So it's directly in line with our strategic plan. And we will be, if the grant is successful, we would run a pilot program where people could bring their food scraps to the transfer station, where they would go into bins and then be taken for composting elsewhere. And also in this part of this grant, we would be looking at a pilot study, or sort of an engineering study of the retired landfill site adjacent to and on the transfer station property. The microphone just picked me up oddly there.
I think they boosted you.
Yeah. So we would, as part of this grant, we would be doing a feasibility and engineering study of the retired landfill to see if a composting operation could happen on that site. So we would get an engineering study to see if it's feasible to do that. And the idea would be down the road, if it is feasible, to consider moving forward with a site. But that is not part of the grant now. So we're not proposing at this time to do composting in Woodbridge or to create a composting site, but to see the feasibility of doing a composting site at the retired landfill. And in the meantime, build up the sort of the day-to-day work that needs to be done in food scrap diversion through households. And overall, the hope is that we can reduce our cost of transporting municipal waste out of town. So it's an issue in the state of Connecticut that all the municipalities are facing, is the rising cost of removing our municipal solid waste. Currently, our waste is moved to Bridgeport, where it's incinerated, but much of the state is facing a rising cost because of the retiring of landfills and closing of incinerators. We had a large incinerator closed in Hartford just 2 years ago. And so ultimately, I think we have the potential to save the town money here, though this particular program is addressed to start doing food scrap diversion and see the potential for compost.
I'll mention that our tip fees in the past year have gone from about $71, $72 a ton to about $85, $86 a ton. So that proves you.
Right. Yeah. Likely to continue going up. So.
Terrific. So
Can you speak?
sorry, Andrea, did you want to?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
All right. So I was going to say, this is wonderful that we're taking action. It builds on a little bit of a pilot that was done at Beecher Road School maybe 10 years ago now, or 8 years ago, and we had some Amity interns involved in that, so it was a pretty extensive pilot, and they tracked how much they were diverting just from the Woodbridge stream, at the Woodbridge School District stream. So to get more data, to find out how much impact we could have townwide, I think that would be terrific. And I think that it's in our strategic plan, when you mentioned the paragraph and everything, with the thought in mind that this is a cost containment effort, potentially, only potentially. We need the data to find out where that happens. But then I guess my question would be, the committee that's working on this, when they start to figure out what the pilot's going to be, is there an opportunity, you think, for the Board of Selectmen to understand what kind of data they're gonna collect so that it comes back to us in the form that we can use to make a decision, right? So we divert from the waste stream and our tipping fee goes down, but if the cost after the grant is over, when we're no longer funded to have Blue Sky or whoever it is pick it up, if we have to expend almost as much or whatever it is. So just the sense that the Board of Selectmen will want very specific data so that we can kind of feed this into our strategic plan's goal of keeping the cost down, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that for the committee, you think?
It is, in my understanding from Blue Earth, who we're partnering with, so they're the current contractor working at Beecher Road School and who we've worked with in the pilot previously, is they track data very closely. Every single bin, you know, they said they can give us very specific data, you know, maybe probably more than we would want, but that we can get it in the sort of doses and amounts that we want in terms of data, in terms of weights and such. So, you know, there are general assumptions that Scrog works with, based on, you know, regional data,
Yeah.
but we can get very specific data from what is diverted here.
And I know that when Betsy Yagla was here, she looked at some potential operations and had worked closely with Public Works to determine what is their cost, and because that has to be factored in as well, and then improvements and all that sort of stuff there. But so all together, is it the Sustainability Committee that's gonna kind of activate here?
The sustainability will definitely have a role in this. I think particularly on the outreach side,
Yeah.
in getting folks engaged in this. And then my understanding really from Blue Earth's experience picking up bins from other transfer stations is that it will be minimal time for our transfer station staff to help residents as they, you know, come to drop off their rubbish and food waste and such. You know, we did include their time as part of an in-kind match, but we won't be expending extra dollars. We don't need to budget extra dollars. But we did include that as in-kind costs, and we included in-kind costs from, you know, as volunteers from the Sustainability Committee, or,
Right.
you know, their efforts in this as well.
And
The
then in
interesting-
terms of locations, is it only the transfer station? I had seen that potentially other sites, but only the transfer station.
The transfer station is going to be, you know, a main source for us, certainly, but we also included a pickup here at in the town center, you know, and as a way to sort of show this to the town and that it's happening and to engage town officials in it. And we noted a location at Massaro Farm as well. It's something that's come up over the years, and I could sort of speak with my sort of Massaro Farm hat on, that many folks who come to the farm have asked about, you know, can we collect compost? And it's really not something that we have the capacity for,
Right.
but we can have a bin. You know, we already have, you know, a private pickup of trash and recycling. So for us, it would really be the same thing. We could have a bin that people who come to the farm can use to drop their compost in the bin, and it would be collected there. And so for Blue Earth, you know, that is funded in there. It's not a financial benefit. We won't charge anything at Massaro to gain anything there, but it would be a resource for the town. And in that way, by having multiple locations, you know, we can engage the town a little bit further. And I would say, you
And
know,
Mika can demonstrate by bringing his pail and dumping
Exactly.
it in there and getting
Right.
his photo taken.
right. And the purpose with the town center, you know, you think about the senior center and human services, the number of meals and events that happen there, it seems a really relevant place to have it. And there's also, you know, to go from there and have a pickup.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely gonna, if it does get adopted around the town, that's where your staff has to do something a little bit different, so, yeah.
The interesting thing with this grant is that it, similar to other grants, it does require a match. In this case, 25%, with 25% match on this. But what's interesting about it is you can achieve that match through in-kind, as Steve mentioned. And what that means is if it's gonna take you more to do something, you calculate what that is, and that's applied for your match. So rather than putting in the dollars and having to budget it, as Steve said, what we've done is we've identified the additional time that it might take for us to do something there or something at the transfer station. And we use that for our in-kind, and it's totally acceptable with the grant. Now, we don't know if we'll get the grant, we just literally applied for it because it had to
So
be
what
done.
is that amount? I mean, is the grant, the total is 165, is that what I see?
Yes,
And
for
so then you're saying we've got.
no, the grant portion of that is, I believe, around 132.
132 is the
Yeah.
total.
132 is the grant, and then
And then
our
the-
piece is the.
Correct.
Rest.
Correct.
Although, yes, but
And-
not entirely from us. So Blue
Correct.
Earth is part of the match, as is Scrog. So it's because they are interested parties in the grant, it's not solely from us. We are the applicant with a partner as Blue Earth and SCROG as a supporting agency.
Well,
And-
And our match is in our time on that line item.
Our match is in our additional expenses incurred, correct.
And then reporting for, so have we ever had a USDA grant? Because reporting and effort and all that.
I will say Blue Earth keeps tremendous amount of statistics. Like they were able to tell us the weight of
Right.
every single bin they collected
But
from
our
the George
match, we
School
would
at the
probably
time.
also have to show.
We'll have to show time, and so this is one of those things that's a match where we have meetings.
We have the clock on right now, right?
Exactly. And so you sort of do an average amount of time that we expect from Mika and Tony, their time,
Public
and then
Works,
doing any
yeah.
reporting and numbers, and we did an average amount of time expected from transfer station staff assisting residents, and then we factored in time for the sustainability committee doing Woodbridge Like Me Day, Earth Day, and various outreach. So that's how we came up with our match numbers.
But Steve, I see $14,000 of the 33 non-federal, 11 of which is contractual and 3,000 other. So that's not in kind. Is that coming from the Council of Government, or is that coming from our town budget?
Nothing is coming from our town budget. No dollars come from our town budget for this grant.
I know you guys were talking about this, but you weren't always speaking into the
Sure.
mic, so I probably missed some. And
yes.
so I apologize for asking a potentially redundant question.
No.
But
Quite all right. So if you're looking at the grant numbers and you're seeing contractual and such, those are things that we're asking money for in the grant. That's not our in-kind match. So
oh,
so
so
the
the
whole,
bottom line is there's no dollar coming from our budget. We're not putting any money. It's just in kind.
correct. It's in
Time of
volunteer
people.
Yes.
contributions.
Indeed. And I will add that actually one of the things that we wrote into the grant here as an expense is to engage our town planner consultant for more hours than we currently have contracted them for. So we're potentially funding them for more hours. I think I had it, I have to pull it back up, but about, an average of 2 hours a week.
And the grant would fund
And the
that.
grant funds that.
Okay.
So we're not taking that from our pool. We're getting
Right,
additional
right.
funds to work with our, already contracted consultant, which I think, it will be really helpful overall. It'll be specific to this project, but being engaged with them further, I think adds value to us in our partnership with them.
Yeah, that's great. Steve, can you just speak, because I know in previous, or anyone, Mika, you could interview, we had talked about solar, the transfer station or the old,
Capital.
Yeah.
I don't know what the proper term is,
Thank you.
but
Yes.
being considered for potential solar site, would
That's,
that location, I know it wasn't the whole area, but would that interfere, or how does this fit into that land use assessment?
it has to be determined. We are looking at solar, and we've identified that as one of the things we need to look at and consider as we move forward. You're right, it doesn't take a lot of land, and the land that we're looking at, based on the site reviews that we've done, is along the driveway of where you go up to the field. It's not on the landfill mound proper, but we are still looking at that property for solar, Andrea, in answer to your question, and this would have to be done with that in mind.
And those they are compatible.
But, correct.
Yes, those are the potential for compost in there and the potential for solar are compatible. They're not mutually exclusive. So there's again, a future potential where there could be both of those things at that site.
And that really entails what we're talking about 2 years from now. That's not something that impacts at all what we're doing now, the pilot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. 3 things, maybe?
Sure,
Steve, thank you. This was a lot of work, I know. And you clearly have done some heavy lifting on this. I'm all in favor of the pilot program, by the way. I think that's a good way to get started in anything, because then you've got some data. Now, the second thing is, I am pretty skeptical. When I look at $165,000 over 2 years, in the document somewhere it said we were going to save 100 tons or whatever. it was gonna give us $9,000 worth of value back. Then you got a long way to go to cover the rest of that. So it'll be interesting to me to see what the real numbers of the program work out, of the pilot work out to be, because in the past, I don't know if we've ever had a grant that didn't cost us a whole ton of money in the long run. And I'm concerned about that, particularly when I look at a big number here and possibly, that's a lot of return that we've got to get in order to make it break even. But the irony of it is,
I'm sorry, David, let me just make sure I
yeah, sure.
understand what you're saying. I don't understand the break-even part because
Well, if it's
we're,
going to cost us $165,000 for a 2-year pilot, it just sounds like,
but the largest portion of those dollars is related to the engineering study to determine if you want to do something else. It's
Right.
not related to running the pilot.
right.
So the pilot itself is something that we could afford to do without a grant.
I'm not against it.
No,
I'm just,
no, I
I'm just
understand.
saying it looks like
But I
a
wanna
pretty
make
big number
sure.
to start up, so we're going to have to get some pretty serious dollars out of it for it to break even. That's all. I'm just saying I'm skeptical, but that's just because I'm a
But
skeptic.
you're saying, you're skeptical of the,
I'm skeptical of how it's going to come out, but I'm interested to see.
not
I want
the
to get the
first 2
data.
years, not the first 2 years, but
No,
after,
absolutely not.
okay,
Not,
not the
Yeah,
first 2 years,
Yeah,
okay.
what comes next is
I'm
the
very,
part.
yeah, I'm just,
Understood,
I'm
understood.
just saying, wow. Let's go for it and see what actually happens. And ironically, because Massaro Farms is in there, I'm assuming you're recusing yourself from the vote.
Yeah, I mean, we are not a financially interested party in this. There's no money coming to or from
Right.
Massaro in this.
I get that,
Um,
but it's mentioned in the document that presumes that there's an interest. I think it would only be in the public's interest. I'm not trying to bust your, but, pull your chain out, because I know you've done the heavy work on it, and I do think it's a worthwhile project, but, keeping it clean, when we talked earlier
I hear
about
you.
that.
I hear you. Yeah, I
and I'll leave that to you to
No, I
decide.
appreciate you
We
mentioning it.
discussed the potential of there being a conflict of interest, with Steve being mentioned in the,
Yeah.
in the grant, and we looked at what the conflict of interest criteria was. So we opted not to do it to be safe, and which is what you're doing now, but in looking at it, we identified that it would not be a conflict of interest because of the lack of there being any gain. However, in the case of the grant, we decided not to even put it there, because why take the risk on somebody looking at it? So I'm designated as the main contact on the grant,
Right?
full disclosure. So I understand your point. It's something.
I
that we
just read
discussed.
it in the minute, I read through the document. I don't know whether it was part of the grant, but it, when I saw that Massaro Farms was mentioned in there, I thought that was.
Right. No,
that
I
there
understand
was
what
a-
you're saying. What I'm saying
That
is,
people might infer that there is an interest, and I would like to keep the board clear of that interest if it's possible. That's all.
and I don't.
I'm not
No, I
being,
understand.
Understood.
I understand.
I may be nitpicking, but that's what I'm
In this
doing.
particular instance, I don't think it's a big concern. The only reason I even raise anything about it is because in another instance, maybe it will be, if there's not a conflict of interest, then we shouldn't prevent
Right.
somebody from voting. But in this case, I understand your point completely.
Okay,
So,
that's all. Thank you. And I'm still in favor of it.
and keeping in mind, the thing that we maybe failed to mention is we did look at what this would look like in a couple of years if we did it along the lines of
Yeah.
how do you break even? Blue Earth manages this, they pay us to use that property. So we collect tipping fees as a result of things coming in from that they're hauling in.
Right.
So there are other sources of revenue, and we sell compost, and they sell compost. There is other areas of revenues that are associated with that, and the good thing is, after 2 years, with the data that Blue Earth provides, we'll know whether it's something that makes sense.
That's what I like.
So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions, comments? With that, I don't know that there's a vote. There really is no
there's no
vote here.
vote, yeah.
There's really no vote here. So it's just that it was more informational to let you know that we've applied for this grant, what it's for, so that later on, if we do receive it, at that point in time, there might be something that we have to make motion for. So today, really, it's really informational. The next item is there any other request with that? All right, we'll move on to our next item, which is the Department of Housing Town Planner Grant Update. Wanted everyone to know that as you received last, as a matter of fact, last meeting, you received the grant document that we were asked to sign. One of the criteria listed in that grant document was that there was language in the grant document that had to be verbatim, had to be part of the agreement with anybody we selected that we would use the grant to pay. So being
You're
that.
talking about the bar grant.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm speaking about the
This
$40,000, the grant money that we used for the town planner.
The DOH grant.
Yes,
Okay.
it's Department of Housing grant, but it was for it was a planning grant for the town planner.
Okay.
So, we had already signed an agreement with the town planner. We had to let them know what our process was, which obviously we followed the process, so that was not an issue. However, obviously their contract didn't include the verbatim agreement. So we sent it to them, we got it back, they agreed to it. It was just literally an administrative type of a transaction. Wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Now, they meet usually on Thursdays to decide what, to finalize grants. So I would like to have this signed tonight or tomorrow morning so that I can send it to them so that we can move forward, they can move forward with their portion of the grant. There is administrative work that's required. We've already reviewed it with Tony and with Karen in regards to what we need to do on a quarterly basis in terms of updating them on what's happening. These grants are not easy, but in this case, I think it's worthwhile. And Karen has so graciously indicated she would take care of it. So at this point in time, what I'm just looking for the board to do is concur that we can move forward with it and see if you had any additional questions.
Has our town council reviewed it?
Yes.
Yeah, Doug got comments back to you guys.
Yes, he did.
So do you need a formal motion, or we just don't object?
Generally speaking, for grant signatures, Tony, I don't believe, there's nothing in our charter that says we need to, for this type of thing, we need a motion. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick.
No, that's right. In
So-
the charter, so it's really,
Yeah, unless the grant specifically requires one.
resolution.
A resolution, then no.
So there'll be another one that you're gonna see that I just received today because I don't know if you remember me talking about the trail grant that we received through conservation. That requires a resolution that I was just sent today.
Okay.
Very simple resolution, but you'll be seeing that at our next meeting. That's why I said there's some administrative stuff that you might be
Right.
seeing when we meet again.
So
But-
I know I previously said, I think it's great that we're adding all the strategic plan indicators, but maybe there should be a grant heading, and like one person can give us all the grant updates at once. We used to do that. I don't know if it
I
would
don't
be
know.
helpful just to organize
How do you
it so
mean?
that we always know that
Oh, which
every month
ones?
we're gonna have a grant update. That way
Yeah.
you don't get these miscellaneous, and then yesterday they told me something, but it didn't make the agenda, so
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Have it coordinated.
Sure, I'm just bringing that up more as a,
Because
Yes.
it's great that we're getting grants.
It
and,
is.
And we can see already that it's
Well,
sort of revving up
although Tony
your
might not
time.
always feel.
Yeah, everyone's time.
It's even nicer that we're hearing about them.
Yes.
So,
Before they are announced, it's
Right.
nice that the board actually knows what we're doing.
so in this case, I'm just looking, if there's no objection to me signing this, I'll move forward with it and we'll get it done. Okay? Andrea, good? You didn't give me your high sign, I like this.
There it is. Very good.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is a board and commission discussion and appointments. I'd like to just start off by saying I'm targeting an all boards meeting in November. Actually thinking of doing it on November 13th, which would be the date of our November meeting. Here's my thought, is that we meet at 5 o'clock as we normally do. We contain our meeting to 2 hours, and then we schedule the all board meeting for 7 o'clock. And we expect that will go about 2 hours. We'll limit that to 2 hours, which means we'll probably get out of here earlier than we usually do anyway. So,
Very optimistic.
but at any rate, my sense is at that point in
You
time.
think I was a skeptic before?
It'll also give an opportunity if the other boards, because it is, all the boards will be together, so they'll have to notice their meeting, their board coming together. If they should want to meet prior to, as their monthly meeting, as opposed to having two meetings, they'll have the opportunity to do that at different places in and around town. So that was a thought. I'm just putting that out. Yes.
We wouldn't fit in this room, though.
Oh, no. We're looking at the gym, which should be ready by that time. So it would be one of our uses is in the gym. It would be open to the public, obviously. We would not be taking public comment. This would be specifically for the board and commissions. I've already spoken with the SLR, with Cooper and Robertson, and with Goldman and York, who will also be there to take questions, et cetera. What we haven't fleshed out is exactly what the role of the Board of Finance will be. It's something that we would like them to obviously also participate in. Chances are they would be with us as opposed to be one of the boards. But this is, again, ideas, thoughts, if I'm looking for input here and just seeing if there's any concerns and wanted to make sure you knew the date and what we were planning for so you could plan for it as well.
Would that include Beecher, Woodbridge? It wouldn't include the Woodbridge?
We could, that's an idea. We could ask if the Board of Education wanted to attend, by all means. Why not?
All right.
Yeah, I mean, they are part of the overall plan.
As far as the agenda is concerned, it'll be a review of our strategic plan.
Yeah.
An overview of our strategic plan. It'll also be an overview of the upcoming budget and what we're looking at. We hope that by the November timeframe, we'll have at least a, what would I call it, Tony? A preliminary look.
We should.
And, just basically, we know there's certain expenses that we're going to incur, additional expenses we're going to incur next year, like labor, payroll.
Yeah.
So it gives everyone in the departments, in the commissions, a sense for what we're looking at going forward before they start their, necessarily, some of them have already I'm sure they're looking at it already type of thing, but it also just kind of positions it. It'll also be an opportunity for us to review the initiatives and things that are happening in town, so everyone, all the boards and commissions are aware of it as well.
The one thing we're trying to get a handle on, even though it's a month or so before it's actually due, is the impact that revaluation would have on the budget process. That's a big piece for next year's budget that we're trying to get our arms around for that meeting.
And the official doesn't come out until like February,
It's
correct?
due February 1st at OPM. That's when the actual documents due, but hopefully we have at least some idea by that meeting.
So there'll be a good amount of information we can share and exchange. So if you have thoughts and ideas, I think your Board of Education, it's not one I had thought of before, quite honestly, just because we never, but
Well,
I
they're
think it's an important
elected,
one. Right.
that's a little bit of a different, it's not one that we
They can't be
appoint.
invited, right, they
But
can't
they-
be invited.
right.
Well, their budget comes to us, at least the
Their budget
Woodbridge
does
Board.
come in front of
But I'm
us,
thinking
but-
the Amity, our representatives on the Amity Board of Ed should likewise.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the
Right.
budget and they are part of the strategic plan in
Yeah.
certain places, so
Both.
they,
Yeah.
Everybody should, invite everybody to the party.
Yeah. So I have a question just about logistics that night. Would it be possible to hold the regular Board of Selectmen here?
Yes,
And then we would close this up and walk over there?
that's exactly the
Okay.
plan. Yes,
All right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that would be the plan.
I
We
can't
would- we
imagine
would have
trying to
this-
do this
No.
as they're coming in.
No,
Trying
this
to
would-
get our.
Yes, we would just hold
Okay.
it, and the thing to remember is, and obviously we'll remember it as we're putting together the agenda, is that we have 2 hours. We have an hour and 45 minutes because we have to walk across the street.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit in strategic planning about, as we get ready to kind of do a presentation, also, all these consultants, the Board of Selectmen, maybe at the October meeting, we'll be hearing from at least some of them, so that we sort of establish the fact that the consultants are, to the extent that they're consulting for the Woodbridge Board of Ed, or the Board of Selectmen, they know the Board of Selectmen is who they're working for, and then they're also working for the boards and commissions, right?
Yeah, along the lines of what we would need to do in November, it'll be a late night in October.
Yes.
It'll
That's-
likely be a late night in October.
Yeah.
Because we've got a lot to cover with a lot of different people.
We're gonna get half of that done if we have the one about the CCW
Correct.
ahead.
You're absolutely right.
Mika, with that in mind, and I don't know if this is veering too far off our agenda item, but knowing that, should we just schedule 2 like a special meeting in October, so we have 2 shorter meetings. Just thinking in the interest of the public too, sitting through a 5-hour meeting if they're interested in listening.
I certainly don't have
Just throwing it
a,
out.
I don't have an issue, Andrea. As you know, I'm here anyway. So, yes, if you want to basically say, please keep in mind that October the fourth Wednesday in October, we might need to do something additional. I think it's fair and a
Yeah.
good suggestion.
Yeah. I think if you're holding that date, it's the 23rd of October.
I'm sure nobody here was told you're only going to meet once a month on the Board of Selectmen.
Jerry Shaw used to be very clear about that with us.
Not so much the people who tell you about it, but
What's the record? We can break it.
We gotta be close.
We're closing in on it.
We gotta be close.
so, all right, moving on. Housing Committee terms. The Housing Committee charge indicates that the term of those who are on the Housing Committee are 2 years. That's 2 years from the date the charge was approved, which is September 14th, which means those terms are coming due. The Housing Committee itself is not indicated. It's specifically the terms that are limited. What I'd like to do is make a motion that we extend the terms of the existing members of the Housing Commission to the end of December. As you know, the Ordinance Committee at this point in time is considering making this commission. It'll give us the time we need in order to get that done. And then when we make it a commission, or when that's formally taken care of, we would then identify what the terms are and stagger the terms. Now, there's 3 new members of the commission currently, and so what we can do is consider that, because they're new members of the commission and it says a term, and the charge indicates that shall be appointed by the BOS for a term of 2 years, and they were appointed by the BOS recently, those can be those are already extended out. So it would be those members who have been on the committee since the beginning that would be the ones who need to be extended. So there would already be some, difference, staggering, but we can formalize the staggering more so once it's taken care of.
So your motion is simply to extend those retiring members of the Housing Committee to the end of December.
And/or we can include December or whenever the new commission is formed.
Okay?
And
I guess I'm a little confused because what's in our packet is completely the old charge. It is not there's no red line of what you're proposing to change. Or are we not changing the
We're not
charge at all?
Changing the charge.
We're not changing the charge, we're extending the term of the committee members. The charge of the committee is not to end, this is the term of the committee members.
But that's only needed for the ones who started at the beginning.
Correct. And as we mentioned in the last meeting, and as Mika referred to, the ordinance committee would like to make it a commission and have it be in line with the other dates of the committees that start in January 1, so.
And staggered terms.
And stagger terms.
So,
Which would happen when we establish that through ordinance.
so if we don't do this, in 3 days, we just have a three-person committee on our
That can't really be
Housing
without
Committee.
board.
There you go.
Well, there's some value in that, I can see.
Yeah, I actually had a different question about this because I realized that when it was constituted, it didn't have a total number of people. There were certain people that were appointed that night, and then people were added subsequently. And I think we're up to 9 members, but one has resigned. We're accepting that resignation tonight.
Correct.
Yeah, and I guess that came up because I noticed that their meeting had only 4 members present, and I wasn't sure how, let's put it this way, do we want to add something to the committee's charge to clarify what a quorum is?
They said it was a quorum. I
Right.
couldn't understand it either.
So
because I
is
don't know
that
the
something the
bylaws.
town attorney told us? So 4, a quorum of a 9-member board sounds odd. So did the town attorney, I don't know if that came from them.
I mean, it depends on what is called out in terms of a quorum.
Right,
If
so it's
it's
not in the
not called
charge.
out anywhere, then it's just a straight majority, but you would
Which is fine.
typically have also being called out in a charge or some sort of enabling authority, like the total number of members, so that that quorum number never changes.
Right, so that's why I'm saying now that we have the charge in front of us tonight, but maybe we don't have the charge in front of us, we just have the terms. So just to clarify, when you constitute a committee, whether it's an ad hoc or whether it's in the ordinance, and there's a 9-member board, a quorum would be, majority is 5, right?
Correct.
Okay. So they only have 4 at their meeting.
That's not what we're talking about. That's-
No, so, but what Nick is noting is we have the ability to clarify that, because I think it was misunderstood. So I don't know if you.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So if we're saying it's a 9-member ad hoc committee, where specific terms are being extended tonight, but it's a 9-member board and a quorum is 5.
Well, I don't think at this point we're saying that it's a 9-member committee. What we're saying is we're extending the term of the existing committee members through the end of the year.
And then
but
we're
we're not-
accepting
we're-
a resignation later tonight, so
Indeed.
then now it's an 8-member committee. Are we gonna, do we want it to be 9 or do we want it to be 8, or will we wait until ordinance is taking this up?
The latter,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
All right.
Because we're taking it up in ordinance,
But my concern there would be, even though one person has resigned, there's still, that doesn't change the number that the board, that was constituted. So it was a 9-member committee, whether somebody resigned or not, and that means you still need 5. Am I right about that? That's a legal question.
If there's a vacancy, then no, it would be a majority of the active membership. Has to go to the quorum unless it's, again, expressly called out in some enabling document.
and the charge
So-
doesn't state.
Yeah, I thought it was the opposite of that.
The charge-
so
the
unless
charge
it's
doesn't
called out,
state.
otherwise it's always as constituted. But we're not really constituting, that's probably.
Right. And
right.
the initial charge doesn't say how many people are on the committee. It may be that 9 were put on. But
Well,
the
we
ch-
constituted it with
Sure.
9 members, so as close as we have. And is it our intent tonight to constitute it with 8 or 9 going forward?
There's no intention of that tonight. Just tonight.
Yeah,
is
it
just
doesn't
to
matter.
just
I
to
mean,
extend.
how many, I mean, whether there was 9 at some point, I mean, that's fine, but at this point, it sounds like we will have a vacancy once a resignation gets accepted. I mean, vacancies happen all the time. So now it's a matter of extending terms, it sounds like, to keep some of the membership still valid. And on the side, I guess it would be for this board to decide who it's going to repopulate that vacancy with going forward. And if there's, some more opinions amongst this board about what the total number of membership for this committee should be and whether that should be made clear in the char, then that is something else that could be separately taken up.
It seems to me if there's not already a number in the charge, Nick, then we wouldn't need to refill that one resignation, correct? Or did I miss something?
I don't know, I mean, it doesn't say it here on the document, but, I mean, I don't know if there's any minutes or prior Board of Selectmen discussion, I'm assuming there was, associated when the board adopted this charge and put it forward. Maybe there was some more discussion about the total membership that this board had contemplated or thought was going to be the case, but, so that's why I say, there could be proof in that sort of documentation, so to speak, what the intended maximum membership number was. But yeah, I mean, without any clear guidance saying, hey, this is a 9-member board, now we're getting a resignation, there isn't any obligation for this board to fill that position if we don't know if it's unclear what the total membership is, as
Right.
defined by this board.
And I think the one thing that the Board of Selectmen should always keep in mind when we're adding people to boards and commissions is that in order to make that quorum, if they don't have the quorum, they can't transact business. So it's really important that people who get appointed follow through and attend meetings, et cetera. And if they resign, we have to replace them in a timely manner because you leave them open to not being able to meet and do the work that we asked them to do. So it's us doing our, making sure that we're enabling people to do what we asked them to do. So the more we
And Sheila,
clarify.
to add to that, it's also, if it's a formal commission, minority representation, or really all committees, right? Or do ad hoc committees, does that
At this-
apply as well?
Yes.
At this
Minority
point, we're
representation?
operating as if committees were commissions, so we're following the same guidelines. So yes, minority representation
okay.
is
All right,
something
thank
that
you.
we are
I wasn't
looking at.
sure.
Yep. So, and to that end, what we're doing is what we should continue doing. In this case, there was 9 members, we should go with 9 members. If somebody resigns, we should look at replacing somebody that resigned. The only difference here is that this is unique in that it's stated a limited term for those people who were originally put on there. Otherwise, there's no reason for us to have this conversation, and we would just operate as normal. But in this particular instance, they have to be extended, otherwise their term expires. And there would only be actually 2, since one of the 3 new ones is resigning. So,
Yeah, I think to assume that it was clear is probably a little bit generous.
My memory of it is that we thought 2 years was plenty of time to get it through ordinance and get it established as a true commission or not. So we're just a little short of that.
3
It
months.
really wasn't talked about much. There was a list of names brought forward and said, here's what it is. All those in favor. So that was it. And that, it didn't, there was no structure to it.
We certainly didn't put teeth into it, yeah.
I
but
don't know that
that's been the
there's any
case with
real-
most of the ad hoc committees. So
Yeah.
again, from
Yeah.
my perspective, it's like, okay, this is different. The other committees didn't have the same criteria or same documentation that this one does. So in order for this committee to continue their work, which is, I think, very important to this town, we need to extend their terms. So,
I agree.
so from that perspective, I'd like to make a motion that we move to extend the terms of the original members who remain on the housing committee to December 31st or whenever an ordinance is established to change it to a commission.
I second.
Miko,
If that's a motion, I
oh, I'm
second
sorry,
it.
but are we expecting it to take longer than December 31st, or?
Yeah,
Ordinances sometimes take a long time.
but we're making this, so I do remember when we created it and the concern about 2 years being enough to get us through ordinance, but if we're talking about open-ended now, so if we were to adopt the motion that you just made, we don't have to do anything with ordinance, and this commission is permanent.
Committee,
This committee is permanent,
as is every other
There's
committee,
no-
as is every other committee we have.
except this one, which was limited to 2 years.
Right.
So I would feel
So we're
better
ma-
about the motion if it actually had a time,
my
so that it's
sense-
not a
See,
ad
that-
hoc that goes forever.
The reason I disagree with that is only because by doing it the way the motion was presented, it puts this committee in the same, with the same criteria as all the other committees we have. There's nothing that limits their terms on the other committee, except what we have
The
in the
other
charter.
commissions.
The other commission, no, in the committees. We have ad hoc committees for sustainability. We have ad hoc committees for building committees are operating as ad hoc committees. They're following the same guidelines that we use. So from that perspective, it makes it more consistent as opposed to having something that's different there. We know what we're planning to do as far as the commission is concerned. That's part of our strategic plan. That's conversations we've had. So if, for example, something occurs where we can't get the ordinance done by December, now we have to bring it back in front of the board. But
that's
if
okay. I
we
mean, that's
decide not to, if we put this in as whenever the commission, they continue to operate as they would and as every other ad hoc committee is operating.
So just as we've got literal days before they run out and we worked it into the agenda and we're extending, we could do the same on the 31st of December. If it turns out we're not going to get ordinance through, I'm hopeful that we would have the ordinance process
I
through.
understand, but why? Why would we want to
Well,
have to do this again? For a committee that,
Like
every
I
other
said,
committee, that would otherwise be just like every other ad hoc
I
committee.
guess the only reason would be that they've already served 2 years, which,
Most committee terms are 4 years.
well, staggered. 4 years.
Staggered 4
And
years, but they're
th-
4
and
years.
these
Usually if
folks are
if
not.
I'm on the police commission,
Right.
I'm on for 4 years.
Yeah.
So when you start a commission, though, staggered 4-year terms means some people got
So
shorter
Staggered,
terms.
yeah.
Yeah, they've got 2-year terms, typically.
I mean, is the issue you're concerned that ordinance would not take this up?
Doesn't have to now. I mean, we
Yeah, it
don't have
doesn't
to,
have
we don't
to,
have to
but
do
I
anything.
mean-
This committee continues.
But the reason
With no
we're
date.
taking it up is because we want to take it up, and we said we
Yeah,
would take
so
it up.
it signals that our intention is to get it done by the end of the year. But it's just my thought.
Yeah, I think the December
I
signals that.
agree with Sheila's logic here. I feel like there should be a date, and there's no issue in having an agenda item come December or January, or whatever the date may be, to have the same conversation if needed. It can help keep the ordinance process on track and keep the town informed of that process. I just feel like that is in better honor with the initial intent of the charge, of the initial charge.
Well, I feel that, I don't agree. I feel that, for one thing, the charge, I think, was originally put forth because there was a very specific task that needed to be accomplished, and that was putting together the housing plan. And the
Not
committee,
this one,
not this one.
not this one.
Okay,
The
The
housing
committee
plan
wasn't-
was already done.
great.
Yeah.
And part of the housing plan was to set up a housing committee. I think it was actually,
The housing plan said we would have a housing committee. The previous board just sort of adopted the plan and ignored what it said, so there was never an ordinance made to make a permanent committee. So basically, the previous board, of which I was a member, we just messed up. We didn't do what we were supposed to do. So now we've got a carryover committee that's kind of a, it's kind of a one-off sort of thing. But I'm 100% agreeing with you, Mika. The last thing I want to do is have to talk about this again in January. I want the ordinance to be done. It should have been done a year and a half ago. It wasn't done. It's our fault. We got to fix it.
and I think we're working toward
But the-
fixing it.
But it's getting fixed, right? It's just a matter of when, and there's some other, if we're considering, or if we're pursuing developing other committees with representation from boards and commissions, I think it's all the more important that we honor terms and do our due diligence to ensure the ordinance issue is addressed as quickly as possible. But having term limits is important. They exist for a reason. And I don't want us to lose sight of that by not having a date included in this motion.
Well, December
Having
31st
a
is
loose
in.
end feels a little
December 31st.
uncomfortable, or
When the ordinance
or-
passes.
I don't know.
I would say, well, if we were standardizing this, we'd be approving them for 4 more years rather than 2 more months.
Staggered.
Or staggered,
Some
well, staggered.
2, some 4.
Exactly, so the people who have served 2 would then theoretically be moving to a 4. They would have served a 2-year.
Some of them.
Some of them, so either 2 or 4, so this is
So
unique in that.
actually, they start all over again. So the people in the ad hoc they have to get named all over again.
Yeah, we would.
So
yeah,
they may or
if
may
we-
not
If
be
we put it in
serving.
an ordinance,
Yeah.
we're going to have to go through the whole process.
Well, right, and we
to
will.
appoint people.
Yeah.
Now, whether we
What's
could take into
realistic?
consideration at that time
Yeah.
what the terms would be for the various people that get appointed,
We would have to.
we would have to.
We would have to.
But I just, we're gonna we're gonna be here 4 or 5 hours every time we meet. I don't want to add another 30-minute discussion in January because
We couldn't have the final
Because we couldn't
ordinance
have the
meeting till
final-
February or-
So
The-
what's a realistic timeline for when we'll have this done? Let's use that date.
I think it was December 31st, and we were just leaving it open in case there was, a reason things got pushed out, there was something
Right,
else
so
to
my
deal
suggestion
with.
was not to take out the date, but was to just
The-
take out
this-
not
this-
or some other time.
So this
Right.
board is going to have to figure
Just
out
make it December 31st.
which of the forms that we want for our housing committee. Because there were at least 3 different forms that we looked at, I think, when we were looking at the models from other towns.
Commissions. The
Yeah,
commission.
we were looking at commissions, authorities, committees.
Correct.
And
Important question.
And those are important questions that we have to decide. Once we decide that, we can write an ordinance, but then we do have to have, it's not, you know, you have the next meeting, then you have public,
You have to
hearing.
bring it to the Board of Selectmen, who then they need to say, okay, we're good with it. We will schedule a public hearing.
Public
at the next
hearing.
meeting.
At the
and-
next meeting.
So-
And then you,
Then-
I think-
then
So
it's-
bottom
then we
line,
enact it.
December 31st is not realistic. So let's pick a date that is what we realistically expect. These, because we're signaling to these folks, they need to commit for another 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever it is. Why don't we clarify?
Well,
Maybe it's gonna
we
take
have to
till
add-
June.
Just
Maybe
do
we
it.
have to add this particular one on the decision about what kind of a commission or committee we're going to have
So
for
ma-
our, for our special
How-
meeting.
How can people
We
commit
extend
to
them for
doing
a
it?
year.
I
Extend
think
them for
a
another year.
year's appropriate.
You think a year?
So
we can get-
we extend them for a year. It's
No
a
longer
limited
than a
amount of
year.
time.
Yeah, yeah. Or
It's a
sooner.
limited amount of time. It gives you a specific date, but it gives us the necessary
Okay.
time if something comes up.
I'd be more comfortable with that.
September of 2000 and, September 14th, 2025.
I'd be more
Could-
comfortable
Or
with
you
that.
could say not longer than, or unless
It-
ordinance is completed prior to then?
We just leave
or
it at,
s- or
we just leave it
something?
at the term is extended another year to that date.
So it says, in the charge itself, it says, in existence until terminated by the Board of Selectmen. If we have the new commission, we terminate this committee.
Correct.
So that's already taken care of. So yeah, next year.
So I'll revise the motion to extend the terms to September 14th, 2025. Do I hear a second? Or I think you made it a second. I don't know if you want a
Yeah,
second. or-
that's a friendly amendment.
Okay. Is there any other questions, any other discussion?
I would just like to know, when do you think we will have that discussion then about what type of ordinance we will want to have?
Let's schedule the ordinance meeting.
Yeah, we've got.
But, you know, the board probably has to weigh in on
Mm-hmm.
preferences toward, and reasons for those preferences toward the examples that we had.
I'd love for the ordinance commission to look at that information and present us some
Will do.
feedback on that before we go ahead and do it.
Yep.
And, you know, we'll make that known to people so that if there is, the public wants to get involved with some information, they're aware of it.
Fine.
So,
Right, we did talk about maybe having that meeting here and having cameras so that people who wanted to catch up on what the thinking is in the ordinance committee, that we might do that. I don't know if we came to a conclusion about that. I know I said that last time.
Totally, we hadn't scheduled the next meeting, so, but I would expect it prior to our next Board of Selectmen meeting. Or
Any
not
other-
our next special meeting.
You said next.
any other questions or
That was
comments?
just, okay.
We'll take a vote. All in favor of extending? It's unanimous. Thank you. Our next item is the appointments to boards and commissions. First appointee,
Should we go to the police commissioner?
Yes.
What are we doing? I can make a motion. if you want.
appreciate you.
So, make a motion to appoint Robert Scalatar to a 4-year term on the Board of Police Commissioners, ending December 31st, 2027.
A second.
Any discussion?
So just to clarify, he's going to assume a term that's already running, right? So it's not 4 years from today.
He's assuming indeed.
The term that expires.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Take the vote. All in favor? None opposed? Thank you. The next one is for the DEI Commission,
Committee.
Committee, thank you. Another ad hoc.
I'll make a motion to appoint Islande Ville-Saint to the DEI committee.
Do we know the term for this?
I don't have that term up in front of me.
The ad hoc committee doesn't specify terms for their members. So that's a topic we can take up for another time in terms of having conversations with DEI. So we correct that.
Yeah, why don't we put that on the
I was
ordinance
gonna say,
committee?
we did, I don't think we addressed it specifically in the last meeting, but we noted it as a committee that needed attention
Right.
by ordinance.
I will second the motion.
Any comments, any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Our next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that we feel require individual attention and should be taken off?
So I don't want to take anything off the agenda, but unless I'm missing it, again, I don't have the resignations. I just have them listed here, I don't have.
I know they've been
Letters.
submitted to the town clerk. We can get you the copies of the resignations. I'm sorry that they weren't in the package.
Yeah, and then maybe just when they come in, if they can be put in a folder for the next meeting, because they're going to be considered.
Yeah, I'm
But
surprised that they
That way we
weren't.
all know.
I'm surprised that they weren't, and it's a good suggestion. We'll do that.
Yeah, we just don't have the practice yet, but,
No problem.
okay. But I'll take your word for it that they've resigned, so.
You're a trustee.
Well, I know for certain that Allison's has. I saw that go to the town clerk. On Miles, I'll leave a caveat saying that I was told it was, so, but I didn't see it myself, but I did see the one.
Yeah, some
From
people don't
Allison.
know that they have to send it to the town clerk, and,
Do I hear a motion to, we don't need, I think it's just an acknowledgement.
Consent agenda.
Yeah, it's just
yeah.
consent.
Motion to
agenda.
approve the
That's
consent
the
agenda.
question, well, I don't know if it's a question or a comment really, but in respect to the consent agenda item about Woodbridge Like Me Day and the banners and A-frames,
Yes,
is that an appropriate thing to talk about right now?
If we pull it out of consent,
yes. If the
Yeah.
consent agenda indicates that we're just gonna vote on them the way they are in there, and we're not going
Okay.
to have discussion.
Well, I have
If you
no
feel you
objection to
wanna have
voting on that.
discussion, you can.
know, I'm happy to vote on it, but I do just have a question about signs in general,
Okay,
like advertisements like that.
yeah,
Please.
we should pull it out then, so we can discuss it.
is it about these signs or is it about signs in general,
Just
please?
in general, I feel like they're very often there and not always well maintained. And sometimes it's distracting and not good looking. And
So some of that's
so
in
is there
zoning
any
regs.
oversight of how these are maintained and displayed?
So can I suggest we just add an agenda item to talk about this? We'll continue with the vote for consent and then.
I'll second.
Okay, so I just made a motion to talk about signs.
Is there any other discussion on that? Is everybody in agreement? Everyone in agreement to add the agenda item? Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for the consent agenda, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Or,
Yes.
second?
Yeah, seconded. Sure.
Any discussion, any questions? All in favor? Thank you. Next item would be, let's talk about signs.
Sorry to have added.
Thank
That's
you,
all
I'm
right.
sorry. I don't, maybe, and if no one else agrees, then let's just leave it at this. But I find sometimes these A-frames in our intersections are wind thrown, or depending on the intersection, or like covered in grass after a mowing, or, I don't know, but aesthetically, they don't land that well. They're not consistent in their form, in their design, in their brand, so to speak. And I don't know. Do other people care about this when they drive by? I think it's
Actually,
important
Andrea,
we have a way to, advertise town events.
I agree with you, Andrea. I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. There's, it's not we don't have a lot of ways to communicate different events within town. We don't have, like, those billboards or anything along those lines. But I understand what you're saying, because I've seen it myself, where a sign is knocked over and it stays knocked over unless you're gonna get out of your car at the stop sign and fix it. But I do understand that this is something that we would have to take up with zoning, and in order to, we need to know what we need to enforce. And I don't know that there's anything in zoning right now, and what we'd have to check on it to determine what is there in zoning that we can use to enforce something that would improve that situation.
So I'd just chime in to say that we did have a draft policy that the Board of Selectmen, back when you served on it, had considered. I think I sent it to you, Nick, at one point, because my understanding at the time, and I'm not an attorney, is that we stopped because those intersections are not our jurisdiction. in any
There's-
way, shape,
right.
or form. However, elementary signs, I think I'm pronouncing it right, I hope Christine Sullivan's not at home watching and wincing, had been in the zoning regs. There were specific zoning regs about how long you could have out the sign, what the process was, et cetera. But the last time I looked at their zoning reg update, they appeared to be gone. I don't know if that's true. Maybe they moved. Maybe they're sending them back to the Board of Selectmen, and therefore we will need to take it up. But they had been in regs. They may be in the process of being removed from regs. Therefore, maybe we should
Anything
be.
in the process of being, my understanding is anything in the process of being removed from the regulation is on a red line. It should be included in there so you can see it. If it's not in there, that's,
It's deleted.
if it's gone, then that's the
It
question.
could be
we-
moved, though.
I could weigh it
Right.
in,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't have precise input with regard to whether our sign zoning regulations are reappearing elsewhere in the zoning regulations. But I will say that the state of the law in Connecticut has changed fairly significantly over recent years, and zoning's authority to regulate things beyond advertising signs, like business commercial signs, has been called into question. So what we have been suggesting and recommending is that the Board of Selectmen do consider and take up a policy and consider we have a few that we've recently actually presented to some of our other towns, a sign, flag, banner type policy that would really let the board have a framework for considering requests to fly banners, to fly signs, flags on town property. We can't do anything about what people do on their own properties, but at the very least, if someone is asking to, hey, can I put this up in this traffic island or in the town right-of-way here or there or in front of town hall, then if this board has a policy, then that puts us on firm legal grounds to be able to say, yes, we want that, or no, that's not consistent with what we're going for here in town. So, happy to.
Right, because
You
we
know,
had
with
this
the-
in front of us with the pool club that time. Do you remember?
I do.
That's
I
exactly
remember very
the-
well.
Yeah, so is it your understanding that it probably is coming out of those zoning regs?
It may.
Because
I
state
don't know.
law
I
is
mean,
Changed.
we've understood, even at the Chairman Klee was here last time representing that many of those amendments were cleanup, so to speak, based on changes in the law, and that may very well be part of where that's coming from.
Right.
Karen, can you make a note for us to just check with Christine tomorrow and see what she can offer as far as that's concerned? And Nick, yes, if you could please give us a draft of something we can use here. We'd like to consider it at our next meeting.
Sure.
And would that be like something that we just do here, or does it need to be ordinance? Would it go to ordinance committee or just policy?
No, it actually doesn't need to be a formal ordinance. It can be a policy, that's publicly considered and approved by this board. There's really two primary ways that we can present this: in a very restrictive way that says, well, we're only allowing, and this, I'll just give for full disclosure what we've reported, what the options are to the municipalities. Just because of our limited ability to advertise, for lack of a better word, some of our community events here, this board may be less inclined to take a more conservative approach, which some towns have taken, which are the more defensible from a legal perspective approach. If we say no to someone and they challenge us and say, well, why are you saying no to us when you said yes to them? We need to have a policy to be able to defend that in court. And the most defensible version of that policy is something that doesn't really give discretion. It says, okay, you can fly state flags, federal flags, you can put up town departmental signs or things of that nature, but that's it. POW, MIA signs, cut and dry. Or other towns have chosen to go in a slightly more open approach, whereby where the structure is, at the beginning of the year, the Board of Selectmen will consider a slate, so to speak, of the typical banners or typical signs that go up for known events that happen throughout the year, and then that gets approved at the beginning of the year. So we have a set plan for what signs have been considered and approved by the Board of Selectmen for the year. And then if there's some organization or not-for-profit or local community group that wants to put up a commemorative flag, we've come to call them, or sign or banner, then that would take a separate application to this board with a little strings attached to how that would work as well. So those are the two main ways we can go. I have them drafted already, so I'll give you both of those so you can see what they look like. And yeah, we can have a discussion.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, do any towns impose like a required break in signage? Because at a certain point, if there's always an A-frame, you're not paying attention anymore, and it's just like,
Sign pollution.
there, like a trash bin is there that you could walk by and never really notice. So I just wonder if towns ever put in not during this season, or there's a 30-day window where there's no signage. I don't know.
I haven't seen that specific level of detail put into these policies I'm talking about. That's not to say that something like that cannot be included, or if this board's inclined to go with a policy that entertains that sort of beginning of the year slate, then we could build into the process. That would be the board's opportunity to identify, okay, we're gonna have this sign up for X amount of time, then there's gonna be this downtime, then we'll have this other sign coming up. So, effectively, I think it could be done that way too.
Thank you.
Any other questions? That concludes our agenda items for the evening, except for
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
motion accepted. All in favor? Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Wow.